Hello and welcome to the Yggdrasil Podcast. I am your host, Retta Tosker. I'm very happy to have Crunchy with us again today. Hello, Crunchy. Good morning.
Good morning. How's it going?
It's going. It's going real good, thanks to recent announcements. I haven't had you on. We haven't talked anything about Shadow of the Erdtree, and now we also have Nightreign to talk about. And so, like, we have I guess, a lot to cover. Why don't you pick? What do you want to talk about first, Nightreign or Shadow of the Erdtree?
Oh, I don't know. There's so much to cover. Yeah, it's an exciting time. I mean, I'm also just excited because uh, like that was maybe the greatest game awards of all time. Because like all of my favorite people, we've got Nightreign, so we've got a FromSoft game.
hmm
But then also like Joseph Fares and Kamiya and Ueda all at the
Ueda,
same
yeah,
time. It was
yeah.
like, oh my God.
Yeah, and Kami's
It was
making
too
alchemy
much.
of all things. It's just
And like a new studio. Yeah, so it's super exciting.
like it was flawless. And not only that, like the award show, I thought was really entertaining. They had the Muppets roasting Keeley. He was conciliatory, and I have heard that he reached out to a lot of the developers and like apologized for having them rushed off stage last year. So he seems to have tried to make amends. And then that speech by Sven at the very end, before or where he was calling out uh, the negative business practices, I guess you could say, that developers have these days, and saying no, the people that are going to win the game awards next year and the years following are going to be the people that are passionate and care about their game.
Yeah, to be honest, once Nightrain appeared, I was so just like, what? What is this? That my brain was just kind of gone for the rest of it.
uh
I didn't even see the Kamiya thing until like
oh
well afterwards
oh
because I was just so like I immediately like scrounging the internet and like reloading pages and just like trying to figure out what was going on.
so I was like that for a while. I Sadly, I think I must have been rude to like the next 15 things they showed, because I didn't clue back in until I saw Gen Designs, Fumito Ueda's new game, and I was like, oh, so we're living in a different world than the world that we lived in yesterday. This
Yeah,
world,
exactly.
this world has a new Elden Ring, has a new Fumito Ueda game. We've got Okami. It's just not the same anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good timeline. But yeah, with Night Rain, I'm super excited about that. And I'm trying to temper my expectations somewhat because I still don't really know what it is we're getting. Um, but just having another FromSoft game, whatever that is exactly, I'm definitely very excited about that.
So I was more excited, you know, I'm I'm at the highest tier of excitement, but I was like above that when I first saw it, simply because I didn't understand what I was looking at. Like I literally
Hmm.
just couldn't comprehend the things in front of my eyes. This just seeing the nameless king there in front of me, and I'm in Elden Ring's world, and all the moves that they're doing. I'm like, what am I looking at? And like I was making all kinds of stupid connections. It's like he's the Stormlord. He's in Stormvale. I see him in
Yeah.
Stormvale. He's the Stormlord that Godfrey went and challenged. That whole thing with Martin, where Martin's like, oh yes, it's a sequel to Dark Souls. It's like, oh, of course, it was there
Oh,
all along.
so someone told me, like, oh, now, the fact that there's a statue of Velka with Muriel in front of it saying all things can be conjoined, like this, all the clues are there. I'm like, oh my God, my brain is exploding.
And then the three wolves that serve as a boss fight like got me to thinking about the three wolves in Farum Azula that
Hmm.
that might be tied to, well, it could be tied to a lot of things. Right now my idea is Marika, but it could be tied to anything. Um, and so like yeah, it's not that obviously, like it's not like a direct canon connection to the Souls games. Although It was actually really funny because I watched Vati's latest video, and in his latest videos, he's like, okay, so it's not like a direct connection, but then he's also like, you can tell he wants it. Like I feel like in that video, he is a lot like me. He would love for there to be a direct connection between Dark Souls and Elden Ring.
Right. Well, the way I see it is, I think first of all, there's two questions that should be addressed separately. So one is, how sort of canonical is this game? How separate, how removed from the base game of Elden Ring is it? And then there's the question of like, is this going to provide any context to understanding the base game of Elden Ring? Because those are two different things. Because there's lots of different reasons why, even if this is totally removed, like the way that you put it as a kind of Hyrule Warriors game, it could still give us lots of insight about the base game of Elden Ring. So that's a separate question.
Yeah, I totally agree.
As for how canonical it is, there's basically three options as far as I see it. One is it is something totally separate. It's like just, okay, complete spin-off, like you're not meant to take any of this that seriously. On the opposite end of things, then there's like, yeah, this is all canon. This is we have a big multiverse, right? And then I think the third is what I think is the most likely, that this is gonna be sort of large-scale canon, but it gets into like weird parallel universe, alternate dimension, timeline stuff,
right?
Where we'll be uncertain about how exactly it connects to the base game, and it'll be kind of removed but still connected.
Like the Marvel movies. Marvel movies are canon, even if they're not canon to whatever is happening in. Like, even if like a thing didn't happen in one of the Marvel timelines, I think this is how it works. I don't watch that many Marvel movies, so forgive me if I embarrass myself. But like, they have multiverses and timelines and stuff. So like, the movie happened, the thing is there, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it happens in like a main branch of what's going on in the movies.
Sure, yeah. And I think, the thing is, the most FromSoft thing that you could do is to make everybody kind of confused and question and figure out their own headcanon for what's going on. So my sort of prediction with it is it won't be totally clear exactly how canonical it is, because that would just be the most normal thing in the world for them.
So we have the recent interviews with the new director. It's going to take me a while to remember his name. Itsuya?
Junya Ishizaki.
Ishizaki. Okay. So, and he said that it's its own thing. It happens in like a separate timeline. If it had to have, he said something along the lines of, if it had to have a connection to Elden Ring, then you should assume that the shattering happened. Like the shattering did happen, and then these events take place in some kind of alternate timeline, alternate dimension, post-shattering. Okay, that's interesting, because, just with that, we're already having ways that we can logically connect it, like not even reaching, like I don't even feel like I'm reaching too far, to logically connect things that we see in that game with things that we see in Elden Ring. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, the thing is, okay, if you want to try and figure out how it might be canonical, right? Assuming that it's not just entirely like you should forget about this, which I don't think is the intention, because I don't see a good reason why they wouldn't try to make it fit. And he even said in that interview, like, he wanted it to coexist. He wanted it to not, distort people's views of Elden Ring.
Mm-hmm.
In order for it to coexist, it has to not, like, contradict.
It can't offend things that were already established. And I think,
right?
Do we not? Miyazaki was involved very early on. Like he's not directing, he's not influencing it, but he was participating during the concept stage, I think is what he said.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and I don't see a good reason why, you know, clearly this is a game made because of a gameplay idea, right? Like Ishizaki was battle director of Elden Ring. He was like a combat designer on Bloodborne and Dark Souls 3, a level designer in Dark Souls 1. He's been around forever. Um and like clearly I think he's just been working on these bosses. He probably worked on Nameless King, and he's just had these ideas rolling around in his head. He's playing other games at the same time, and he goes up to Miyazaki. He's like, "Hey, can I? I've got this cool idea. Can I do this?" Um, so it's definitely, I think, a game made for a gameplay idea rather than, with Elden Ring, like, okay, we've got this story, we want to make this grand adventure, and with all these different pieces to it. This is like about a certain type of gameplay that this guy wanted to create. But I still don't see a reason why you wouldn't try and make it, fit with the Elden Ring universe. There's no obvious reason why you would try and make it super, super separate.
Yeah, like I just would have trouble. I can kind of tell that my opinion is biased here. I would really like more lore to work with when it comes to Elden Ring. I'm really desperate for more.
This is what I said in I was streaming about, whether this is canonical or not. And the thing is, like, every lore hunter, you should be suspicious of what we think about this, because it is we are highly incentivized to want to make it fit, and to make it really meaningful.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I definitely feel that way. Like, I know I'm biased, but let's assume I'm not, and take my word seriously when I say that. Just from the perspective of, number one, there's no reason for them to try to make it not fit. Like, they wouldn't need to go out of their way. Miyazaki was part of the concept stage. He surely would have been giving guidelines as to what not to mess with. And if we see something that gives us information about pre-shattering or characters that we already know in Elden Ring that we didn't see in the base game, there's no reason to assume that wouldn't be the real personality. So an example I gave in my video was, like, if Mikola shows up and talks, and says things, I think it would be perfectly reasonable to try and infer his personality from the kinds of things that he would say, and then infer his values in the base game of Shadow of the Erdtree. Really try and get to understand why he did things based on something like that. If Radahn talks, if that bird person, that's one of the 8 playable characters, tells us that he comes from a tribe of bird people, that live somewhere that used to live in Stormvale, I think I would probably just take that seriously and be like, okay, there were bird people in Stormvale, if he said something along those lines, because he did say everything that happened in the Shattering, that's canon to this timeline. This game has a story. It has its own canon. Even if we assume it's separate from Elden Ring's canon, they share the same canon up until that point, according to what they said.
Yeah, and I think, you see certain things in the trailer, like, okay, there's some kind of eternal city architecture, there's these, like, shadows of titans. There's plenty of things which, yeah, I'm totally willing to accept, like, if we get some information there. I don't know what the null hypothesis would be. Like, what would be the falsifiable part of this, where if you saw something, like, you go, oh, okay, no, that doesn't relate.
Yeah.
So that's a bit trickier to figure out, and I don't know if we'll really know that until.
Well, I can think of something that would make me pause. For example, I'm assuming that the Dark Souls 3 bosses and the Souls bosses are not going to speak and are just going to be, cool boss fights. And they'll have a lore reason why they're there, but they won't talk, they won't have dialogue, and they won't shed any light into Souls games. And if they don't, then I think we can keep working with the assumptions that you and I are making. But if Storm King talks and says something that changes any lore from Dark Souls through implication, then I would be very hesitant to take anything that anyone else said in Elden Ring, any of the Elden Ring bosses, because we know Margit is there. We hear his voice actor. We know that he talks. If Storm King talks and he falsifies previously established lore for Dark Souls, then at that point I'd be like, okay, I can't take anything that any of the bosses say seriously. Probably.
I think that's fair. I sort of feel like, with this question of like how this relates to Dark Souls, I think there's a few different possibilities, but I think the most likely thing is that this is not literally connecting the Dark Souls and Elden Ring universe, but rather this is something more like patches, where we see the Nameless King, and it is like 1-to-1. It's the Nameless King. But I think in the Elden Ring universe, I don't think that's the Nameless King. I think, maybe he's even called the Nameless King or whatever, but I think it's going to be like, I think that's the most likely, is that, we're reusing the Nameless King, but it's not Nameless King from Dark Souls. This is a character who exists within the Elden Ring universe or even multiverse, but it'll be, and it'll have all the attributes of the Nameless King, and there might even be some little references to make you go, wait, is this actually from Dark Souls? The same way, like, in Dark Souls 3, there's like the Moonlight Sword spell. I think
the one that references Kingsfield.
Kingsfield, right. That's not actually saying that Kingsfield exists in the Dark Souls universe.
Maybe it is.
I mean, maybe.
It does talk about, we do have Seath's from Kingsfield.
At least I think it, of course, it could leave the possibility open, but I think more likely it will not directly confirm that this is like Dark Souls exists within this universe.
Well, the way that I see it, it's not. I think that we don't need to take. I think that they're just going to be like, something's happening and it's causing heroes or things from other worlds to pop up around here, and they'll come and then we can go and fight them. But I don't think that we need to take seriously. I think it is just Nameless King from Dark Souls. I think that's just what it is. It is Nameless King from Dark Souls, but it doesn't matter that it is Nameless King from Dark Souls, because he's just a visitor from another world. Like, and it's not a connected multiverse. Like, this is the kind of multiverse that wouldn't connect in normal situations. It only can connect in this Nightrain, a separate timeline crossover event that wouldn't actually happen in the normal Elden Ring world. So I do think it's just going to be Elden King.
Elden King.
Elden King. I think it is just going to be Nameless King, but I don't think that we need to make any big deal about that. But again, I would change my tune if he said things that started messing with previous Dark Souls stuff. I think he's just going to be present and we fight him and that's it.
Yeah, well, the reason that I lean towards saying it's going to be sort of Nameless King but not Nameless King is because, like, these games have such a they get to things on such a cosmic level. Like, we have these sort of the rules of this world, and if, like, I don't think we have to start going, okay, does the first flame exist in Elden Ring, right? Like, this, these grand cosmic forces, like, is it
literally the painting from
does the Formless Mother exist in Dark Souls, like this kind of stuff. I don't think we need to go in that route, because I think there's a simpler way that you could just, we want to put Nameless King in an Elden Ring game. Well, you don't have to say that the whole entire lore of Dark Souls exists connected to Elden Ring. You can just go, well, this is a character. We'll call him the Storm King, and everybody will go, wait, is Dark Souls and Elden Ring connected? Oh my god. And they'll come up with all these theories, which is what FromSoft loves. But it doesn't have to imply anything greater than just this is a character. I mean, the oddest thing to me is not Nameless King. It's the Centipede Demon. Because
why that one?
Well, because with Nameless King, like Dark Souls 3 and Elden Ring are not that far apart. I've actually been replaying Dark Souls 3 and I'm noticing all these, like, just a myriad of little things that they've seriously improved in Elden Ring that I totally forgot about. But, like, you know, in terms of the fidelity of the models and the animations and all this kind of stuff, it's not that far away from Elden Ring. But, like, Centipede Demon... So when it comes to Nameless King, like, you could, you know, port the animations into the Elden Ring system, you know, touch it up, tweak it, add in some new stuff. But when it comes to Centipede Demon, like, the way that looks to me is like they created that basically from scratch or near enough to it.
Yeah, it doesn't look anything like the original.
Well, I mean, it just couldn't because, like, you know, the graphic fidelity has...
It's hideous.
You know, the textures, the polygon count of the model, like, you have to create something completely new for that. So why did they pick Centipede Demon? You know, that's such an odd...
So I do have a theory. I do have a theory, but it's not anything special. It's just a mechanical theory. I don't think that... So basically my whole thing is that I think that this is an attempt to... Well, it's not even a theory. They are making this a co-op focused game. Was recently confirmed that it's no duos. You can play solo or you can play with 3 people. With obviously the encouragement being to play with 3 people. This is a co-op oriented game, whether you play with randoms or with your friends. And given that it's a co-op oriented game, they are going to try and balance the bosses for co-op finally, for the first time. In my opinion, for the first time ever. Because I've always been harping on about how the bosses in Elden Ring and Dark Souls are absolutely terrible for co-op. They've never been good. They can't effectively deal with 2 people. I'm so happy that Vati pointed this out in his video because it's something I've just been harping on all the time. And I always get people coping. It's like, no, it's perfectly reasonable for, you know, they're totally balanced for 3 people. It's like, no, it's not true. There's no way that's the best they can do when it comes to balancing for 3 people, because it's just, in my opinion, it's just sad. And so I think that Vati was quoting a interview that he read, because most of the information he got was from interviews that he read. And he talked about how the Centipede Demon splits off parts of itself and they fight things. And that is, in fact, something that happened in Dark Souls. You could cut off one part of his body and it would split off. I think that they are going to adapt any boss that they bring back from the past to be good at fighting 3 people, or at least decent at fighting 3 people, and that means they have to change a lot. So for Centipede Demon...
That makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, for Centipede Demon, you can have more of its body parts fall off in different ways. That's why one of the reasons why you can't have him looking just like that. It won't just be that one arm that falls off. And the other 2 that we've seen, also you could easily see a way for them to be like Freya. The Duke's Deer Freya spider has 2 heads in Dark Souls 2 on both sides of its body. So that's, 2 openings for 2 different people to attack, and it also summons a bunch of little spiders in its boss room, further augmenting its co-op capabilities. Storm King could hop off of his dragon. A Nameless King could just hop off of his dragon and fight independently before hopping back on at some points.
Right.
So I think
that makes a lot of sense, actually. No, I think that explains it. And that's the thing with the three wolf head kind of boss that splits off into 3 wolves.
Right.
No, that makes a lot of sense. That was the idea. Yeah, I like that.
Yep. So that's what I'm thinking is doing it, because really, Centipede Demon is really bottom of the barrel when it comes to Dark Souls. one boss is like, you would never, no one is over here harping on, being like, whoa, Centipede Demon, that's what I want to see.
Yeah. No, that actually makes a lot of sense. because that would also be like, yeah, very gameplay oriented idea. Let's go back through our catalog and see what could easily be turned into something that, can split apart or create sort of multiple bosses for co-op. Yeah, I like that.
I would love a revamped Ornstein and Smo. Maybe Ornstein and Smo and what's her name? Carrion?
Chiaran or
Chi-
Chiaran, yeah.
yeah, and Gao, the four knights all at once, or something like that. Or Artorias on his own, but it's peak Artorias, and he's using his shield, and he has his sword still. And Sif comes along, and maybe if you kill Artorias, Sif grabs the sword and uses it against you. I could my
That would
my
be amazing.
my mind has been alight with ideas. It's such a see. This is one of the reasons why I'm so excited. Apart from the lore possibilities, which shouldn't be underestimated. I think that there might be something there, but the gameplay possibilities. This gives FromSoft an opportunity to design bosses in ways they haven't been able to up until this point because they've never really focused on the co-op experience. God, I can't I can't wait to fight Nameless King with a group of three and have him be adapted to be able to deal with three people. I want to get fucked up. I want to lose that run.
Yeah, and I think also having it be more constrained, so having like set characters means you can you can balance things in a way that you can't really when you're so focused on RPG mechanics.
Mm.
Even if there's different upgrades and different weapons or something like this, like there's going to be certain constraints on these characters, and just from a design perspective, that means that like you can really you can design the player and the enemies to fit together a little bit easier. Where like Elden Ring is so RPG focused, there's so many different ways that things can go, and that just is like a balancing nightmare because there's just an endless number of possibilities. And that's why like, people will discover some like broken build or something like this. And it's actually amazing that so many things are viable in Elden Ring, but like if you don't have to worry about so much of that, if you can just okay, here's the characters that you can pick, and okay, they can get stronger, or they can use some slightly different things, but like within a narrow range, then you can really design that to fit better together. So
I'm not
yeah,
sure that it's going to end up that way because how I understand the way that the game is going to work is that even if you're a mage, you don't have to use magic. You can pick up a sword, like, and any one of the characters can the loot will be randomized. So you might get a sword, you might get a halberd, you might get a staff, and maybe you'll get a really good magical staff, that you might want to use. But you're not typically a mage, and you picked the heavy warrior axe guy. Well, if it's a really good staff, and in this run you're not seeing a better option, maybe you'll lean into that because you'll get different passives and weapons, and any class can use any weapon. And I think the fun of it is oriented around quickly making a build because you've got 45 minutes to get prepped for the final boss. Uh, Given that I'm not sure it actually is going to be less variety. I'm not sure that the individual characters are constrained in the way you're describing.
well, I mean, I'm definitely hoping that there's still a lot of those RPG mechanics there, but I mean, just the fact that you have pre picked characters, like there's going to be some things that are unchangeable or like base qualities to those characters, whether it's I
Yeah,
don't know, different stats or default ability or something like this, right?
yeah, the
And
default ability.
even just that, I think that's like a consistency in from a design perspective. That's a consistency that you can rely on when you're designing the enemies and the bosses,
Because you can control the
which you
base, so you can control the heights
right. I
they can
mean,
get to.
the equivalent would be like the starting character classes in Elden Ring, but by the time you get into the game, that really doesn't make much of a difference at all. So if there's more of that like starting consistency that you can rely on, I think to me that's there's potential there.
I am uh really happy with a lot of these characters because I like the idea. We've seen very little of what they can do, but they seem to have multiple skills, each one of them, that they can use. So the main character looking person has the grapple hook, and he also has a pile driver next to the grapple hook, so that we've seen that he can do those two things at least. Uh, the bird guy can fly around, and the warrior guy like can summon a pillar that he jumps off of and smashes down onto. That seems like a useful thing to revive your allies too. Uh, the samurai guy has a deflect. I knew there was a deflecting mechanic in the next game. Like I was, as soon as I saw the deflecting tier in Shadow of the Erdtree, like, oh, they're cooking something. They know deflecting is good.
Yeah, I think that that'll be the really interesting part to me, at least, is like seeing, because they're clearly designing the different characters around like certain roles. So
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know, maybe there's lots and lots of different weapons and different ways that you can play as the characters, but they're there's going to be a more sort of tanky character, there's going to be a
Mage.
faster character, there's some, yeah, like these different roles that um I mean, I haven't really played a lot of like hero shooter type games or anything, but I I can understand the appeal of something like that, where there's a certain amount of like there's a certain amount of player expression that's involved in just picking which character you want, because like you know I'm not a very good reactive player. That's why I kind of suck at like Sekiro. So I tend to play, when I'm building a build in the Souls games, I tend to play slower and more tanky, and that's why I also prefer the like Dark Souls and Demon Souls slower methodical style of gameplay. So then now I have like okay, I can pick the character that like fits me, or I can pick this other character and see what I can do with that, and so there's a certain amount of like interesting choice in picking that. And then to see how that interacts with other players, like, I'm gonna have two other people, play with my siblings or my friends or something, and like, well, I want to be the mage, you got to be this guy, and that'll be the really fun element of it. I think is like strategizing around which roles you're playing.
God, I really, I really want to play this game. Uh, I saw that they're having a open beta test, and I go over to my Discord. It's like, hey, you guys might want to sign up for this open beta test, even if you don't want to play. Like, even if you don't want to be in the open beta test, maybe sign up anyway to get a key. Maybe share it with me. Share it with me. Give me the damn key.
Yeah, I'm super excited. I'm super excited for that. And also, I've had my gripes with certain things about the direction of the Souls games. I know we kind of disagree a little bit on this, that I'm not as big a fan of some of the action elements. But that being said, the fact that this guy has been around since Dark Souls 1 uh makes me very um hopeful, and also the fact that this is not trying to be too many things at once.
Mm.
That this is something I feel is a broad generalization, but is generally true of Japanese game studios as opposed to Western game studios, that the games tend to be more sort of focused on one concept. Something like, I mean, like Devil May Cry or Bayonetta. um you know the, they tend to be more, I don't know, cohesive in a way, whereas you get things like The Witcher, or
Oh, I see.
that where you're trying to do kind of so many different things and put them in the same game. And with Elden Ring, like, it's trying to be a grand adventure, and in doing that, it puts in so many different things. With this game, it feels more like this is aiming at one idea,
Yeah.
and that I feel very good about that.
What do you make of all the complaints that have you seen the complaints that a lot of people have been levying things like the reused assets, a that they've sold out, it's a quick cash cheap lazy cash grab from software and other such accusations. Have you heard any of that?
Oh yeah. I think it's fair to be suspicious because like everybody's been so abused by some of the practices of
Yeah,
video game companies. So like
yeah.
I totally sympathize with that. I don't think that's exactly what's going on here. Um, because first of all, this is a bottom up kind of game. It looks like right.
Yeah.
Like this is a someone within FromSoft who had an idea that like went to Miyazaki and Miyazaki approved it. This is not like
They
Bandai like, oh, we're gonna take the Elden Ring IP and to me
force them
like
to
the
do it.
demon
Yeah.
yeah, like the Demon Souls remake to me is more of a kind of cash grab in that sense because it's like the executive level deciding that we need to use this IP because there's a lot of money behind it. Um, this looks a little bit more bottom up to me. However, I think probably, and I don't know if this will ever be confirmed or not, but probably Bandai did sort of strong arm FromSoft into doing something with the Elden Ring IP.
Are
So
they
I
able
think
to do
probably
that now? Didn't
I don't
FromSoftware
know.
purchase the rights to Elden Ring completely from Bandai recently,
I mean
specifically to prevent something like that from happening?
the reason I say strong arm rather than like they commanded them is because there's ways that you could sort of influence them into doing that. There's ways that you could, and maybe it's not Bandai even, maybe it's people on the board or something. Like I don't know exactly how that works behind the scenes, but I wouldn't be surprised at least if there was some kind of top down pressure to do something with this IP because it's so successful and but probably non-specific as to what. It's sort
Mm.
of there's sort of a similar situation. I guess this is slightly different because there was actually a contractual obligation here, but with Bungie and the Halo games, once they made Halo 3, they were still contractually obliged to make two more Halo games, and so like one of them they made Halo 3 ODST, which was originally going to just be a little DLC, and then they like sort of turned it into a game, even though it was really a DLC. Um, so I could see something where like there was some top-down pressure, like you got to do something with this IP, but as far as like the concept behind it, this doesn't look like. I don't think the reasons that because people are are looking at okay, oh, there's like the Fortnite shrinking cloud and they're
Yeah.
like selling out, they're trying to be a big I see this as more of this is probably Ishizaki like rolling
He
around
likes
ideas in his
Fortnite.
head.
He likes Fortnite.
Yeah, and he's probably just playing Fortnite at the same time and he's like, wait, this would be a really cool like game design concept if we could do this and this and this. To me that's what it looks like. So I mean, I'll keep an open mind, and if it does end up being something that looks more sellouty, like I'll be super disappointed.
Oh yeah, I'll complain. I'm a
Uh,
complainer. It's what I
yeah,
do.
I will criticize them for it. But I feel like FromSoft has, especially if we're grading on a curve, like FromSoft has such a good track record. I will absolutely give them the benefit of the doubt until they abuse that trust. They haven't abused it yet. So I would trust them over just about any company I can think of.
Mm. The way that I see it is and I guess a lot of other people always are like, I want to see what they have to do next. We have heard from software talk about it time and time again that they, we want to tackle new games. We don't want to make sequels all the time. We want to try new things with our studio, and this is them trying something new. Like this is them saying, okay, this director is going to get his shot to try something new. Um, and yeah, I don't play battle royales. First of all, this isn't a battle royale. But even if they did make a battle royale, I think I would give it a shot. I constantly talk about on my channel where people don't know what they want until they try it. And that doesn't just apply to other people. Like I'm not like looking down on everybody. It applies to me. It applies to me. I don't know what I want, and maybe this is what I want. Second of all, this just kind of sounds based. Like it just sounds phenomenal after listening to it for a while. So yeah, there was like an initial not as hyped when I realized, okay, this is not a like canonical confirmation that Dark Souls 3 is connected to Elden Ring. It's not like a DLC or an addition to it. So there was an initial slight disappointment, but then I realized, well, first of all, I'm getting the co-op experience that I've said that they should be working on forever. If you play something like Remnant or another Souls-like game that actually has a co-op focus or is built from the ground up for co-op, you can tell what you've been missing out on uh, playing Elden Ring with others. So I'm getting that, and just the idea of being able to fight a revamped Nameless King or any of these other bosses, the idea of being able or, to just come back to Elden Ring. One of my main complaints with Elden Ring, I don't know if you share this. I've heard other people don't have the same problem, but I can't replay Elden Ring over and over. I don't have Dark Souls is small, and Dark Souls 1 and through 3 you can kind of finish in an afternoon after you've gotten good at it. You can finish it in a day. And even if you're playing slowly and picking up all the stuff and musing on the lore, you can finish it pretty quickly. It's not a big event. But in Elden Ring, I can't really do that. One of the things that I like to do in Dark Souls is to muse about the lore. So I need to look at the item and read the item description and think about where I found the item in relation to everything else. But in Elden Ring, there's like so many items all over the place, in caves, in things. My initial playthrough was like 250 hours, and if I wanted to be thorough the way I was in the older Dark Souls games, I don't want to just make a build and then go to PvP. That's not the only reason I play Souls games. And so I love the game. I love the game, and I never really feel done with it, but I do feel done starting over and over. It doesn't appeal to me. But this gives me an opportunity to play the Elden Ring gameplay, because by all accounts, the gameplay is basically the same. So I get to play the Elden Ring gameplay in these short bite-sized sessions. That's, high action, high intensity, and then I can put it down and then play again later. It's exactly what I needed to be able to keep playing some Elden Ring-esque thing.
Yeah, I have a slightly different experience because I replay Elden Ring over and over again. And, when I'm playing Elden Ring, the actual combat and the, whatever you want to call gameplay is kind of an ambiguous term, but that element of it is sort of a smaller proportion of like what's keeping me engaged. So it's, I'll spend like 2 hours in the character creation menu because I'm thinking about what kind of character am I making, and how do they fit into this world, and that sort of thing. And what the build I'm going to create, what items am I going to get, and what's my path through the game going to look like. So much more like the RPG sense of it, which there is still there. I think there's always something with RPG games where like the beginning can be it can get old quickly. I mean, before I ever discovered the Souls games, I played hundreds of hours of Skyrim, and like the beginning of Skyrim, especially since you're sort of forced through certain things, that gets really old. And like, if I tried to play Skyrim now for multiple reasons, it would be, I would not have a great time. But no, I feel like the way I'm looking at Nightrain is like, this is not going to be whatever I'm going to get out of this game, it's not going to be the same thing that I get out of Elden Ring. Even though it's using a lot of the same stuff, it's going to be a totally different experience. And that's actually why I'm excited, is that it's going to be something totally different. So, totally different. There will be similarities, but um, yeah. So I don't have a problem with like replaying Elden Ring, but to me this is just going to be, I'm interested to see what they cook up with a tighter, more focused game that's like about co-op, that's about a certain sort of gameplay loop rather than this sort of expansive adventure. Um, and I don't know what that's going to look like, but I think for people who are in Elden Ring for the grand adventure, like you can look at this and say, oh, this is such a a step down. Or you can just look at it as, no, this is a totally different thing, and that can be also good. Like, I like playing Elden Ring, I like playing the Souls games, I also like playing Halo, I like playing Minecraft
Right.
or whatever. Like,
Right.
they're different. There's no genre. Like, yeah, genres cannot be bad. The genre cannot be bad. Like, I'm not really into racing games, but I'm sure there's amazing racing games out there. And even if
Yeah.
there aren't, I'm sure you could make one. So yeah,
Yeah.
I don't believe in like, oh, it's this type of game, therefore it's
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah. I think it really is the battle royale element is what the closing circle. I think that's really one of the reasons people are getting hung up on. I think that there is I'm probably guilty of this too. There's like a tendency to look down on battle royale as things that the common folk play. That's for the masses. That's not for us. And so they see the battle royale circle and there were so many rumors. I had to clarify so many times during streams that there's no battle pass. Like this isn't
Right.
online always. You can play solo. There's not going to be a premium currency. There's
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think that's super important because like when it comes to something like Fortnite, like I can't really get into Fortnite because of certain aspects of it. I don't like the UI, I don't like the character design, and I don't like the sort of attitude of kind of, I don't know, sort of cringy, just like, throw everything in there. But like that's a well designed game. I mean, I don't know if you've ever tried playing it, but like that is a well built game, and I totally understand why people really like Fortnite. There's certain aesthetic parts of it, and certain, even though it's not exactly play to win, even you know, even cosmetics. If you're buying cosmetics, like if you can buy a character that's skinnier and smaller, you've got smaller hitboxes. That is kind of an influence on the gameplay. But
that's not even.
um,
It's not even just that. People want the cosmetics. There's a they have battle passes. They have the FOMO that they use to prey on. I just don't like monetization. I don't like the way that
yeah,
these people monetize. It really makes me
no, I mean,
angry.
I only play games where you buy the game and then you have the game, and I feel like that's a good baseline. I don't like when it goes too far away from that. Like, okay,
This
you offer me a DLC, as long as I can buy the DLC and it's
yes,
like a whole thing, and then okay, now I have that. So I would prefer you give me the option to buy the product fully, and then I can play it fully. I don't like the kind of trickle of little, oh, you need to buy, you can buy 99 gems for 5.99, but the thing that you want to buy costs 120 gems, and then all these little practices that are designed to kind of you know
yeah, designed in a lab
it,
to
it
try and get you to spend.
exactly. I
It
don't like that aspect, but
it's one of the
this
reasons
is
why
not
I
that. Like,
well, hang
sorry,
on, hang on.
yeah.
Let me, because you've got me thinking about something. This is the reason why I talked about gacha games being undeserving of any accolades, because people will sometimes say, well, these gacha games often have these they have good stories or something, or the gameplay is good, or like the monetization is not that egregious. But like, first of all, I don't believe you when it comes to the monetization not being that egregious. But with things like Genshin Impact and their ilk, the point is get you to spend time with it to make money. So I don't doubt that maybe some of them have good stories or character dialogue or gameplay, but you know, you can't serve two masters. You are the people developing this when they have to make a choice between something that gets you playing longer and more likely to spend, and some gameplay addition. They're gonna choose that every time, because the ultimate goal is to keep you there. Like those that nice story and that nice gameplay, that's not there for its own sake. It's there uh, as a byproduct, or like a necessary evil to keep you engaged and keep you spending. So it just, you're not really. I don't respect that kind of game. I don't like it. I have strayed too far from my ecosystem, because I'm like you. I pay for a game and I own it, and I don't really play anything that doesn't do that. I've strayed too far because I'm playing Helldivers, and I get myself in trouble criticizing Helldivers' monetization all the time, even though it seems that among games that monetize, it's apparently really good, because everybody defends it to me. Like, you're being ridiculous, they tell me, for complaining about how Helldivers does it. But I don't think I am. I just saw they had a collaboration event where they're selling one gun for $6. Like, and I'm just like, does nobody have a problem with it? It's in their rotating store. They've got the FOMO there with it. It's $6 for one gun, and it's not cosmetics. Like Fortnite isn't this bad, because it's not. It's Helldiver's progression system with how their warbond systems work is, you have to pay to engage with the progression system. You have to pay money to engage with the, and people will argue with me because they're like, no, you don't, because you can earn the currency in game. And I just don't think that's any excuse. I just don't understand why nobody has a problem with it. I don't understand. I don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, a lot of people have this kind of dividing line of like, oh, well, if it's cosmetics, it's fine. If it's something else, it's not. But even cosmetics, to me, there's not a hard line there, because, I used to and still do play quite a lot of Halo 3, and
Oh yeah.
even something like just the color of your armor affects gameplay. Like, if you're playing on a lush, verdant green map, and you have a cool color like a green or a teal or something, like, you're gonna blend in more than if you're pink or red or something, right? So even just the color of your armor, which in Halo that's not attached to anything. You can just choose whatever color you want. But even something like that, where it's really simple cosmetic choice, and then you get things like, well, if you have different skins, is one more reflective? Does it have a different, like, specular amount, so that if the light is shining on you, then you can be noticed by an enemy more easily? Like, these things actually do affect gameplay. And I know maybe that sounds really like, oh, this is some obscure little thing that only a few people would notice, but um people might not acknowledge it or notice it consciously, but it will affect gameplay. And so even cosmetic stuff, I feel like I'm highly suspicious of the idea that you're trying to sell this stuff for money, and sort of string people along for that, because it speaks to something bigger, which is like, you didn't, you meaning the designer, you didn't have like this cohesive picture in your head. You didn't have this vision of like what this game should be. You're like adding things in because you can, or because you think people will buy them. It's not based on, at least not based entirely on, like, here's the vision of the game, this is how it's going to work. And so even live service stuff where you're not paying for anything, I'm suspicious of. This is just, you should have a game, and that's the game. That's how it works. I mean, how else are you gonna,
I
patches and balance the stuff? I get that. You're trying to, like, tweak it and make sure it's all cleaned up. But when you're adding things in, like, I've been so burned by Minecraft, because that was like my favorite game ever, and they just totally ruined it by adding in things over time, because there wasn't like a clear vision behind it. So
Hmm. I you know, this is actually an interesting conversation. I think that even cosmetics, even so, why are you selling me these cosmetics? Is the thing. So why aren't these skins or armors or whatever the thing happens to be, whether it's free or paid? Why isn't it in the game already? You know, like if it's free,
yeah,
especially
exactly.
if it's free, why isn't it in the game? Like, y and if it's paid, certainly, it's like, did you leave it out just to sell it to me later? Is it?
Yes, right.
And that's okay. And so let me give you an example. Monster Hunter. In Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate, they had tons and tons of collaboration events and skins, and they had a bunch to default, and you could layer any armor to be like any other armor. And then they had events that they have title updates. They updated things and they added tons and tons of stuff after the game released. Fine, there's tons of skins and armor skins and weapon skins and actual armors, not just skins, like armors that they added because they added an event that you can earn the armor in. And then in Monster Hunter World, they sold one piece of armor as part of the deluxe edition or something. It was a samurai armor. It's very cool looking samurai armor, but it was only one in Monster Hunter World. And then there was only one in the DLC that was a cool knight looking. And then Monster Hunter Rise comes out, and Monster Hunter Rise has like 100 sellable armor, and they're selling them not just not just the armor, they're selling them piecemeal. So here's the skin for the arms. Here's the skin for
Mm.
299 for the chest. Here's another one for 299 for the headpiece. And I'm just looking at this like literally like 200 pieces of DLC or something like that. Several times the price of the game over. And I'm thinking like, how do I know that you didn't reduce the amount of free stuff that you would have given us? Because you used to give us all this kind of stuff for free. We used to get armor for free. We used to get title updates for free. They used to be part of the game. They give us this really high quality Dante armor for and sword. Like there's a sword and shield thing in the game, and they like made it work like Dante's sword. Dante doesn't have a shield, but he has powers to it, and so like the whole thing kind of works the way Dante's thing does. The whole cosplay for Dante, it was very high quality and unique, and they gave it to us for free. They would charge us for that today. I'm so sure. So it's just suspicious all around, especially when games like Elden Ring and Monster Hunter, especially at some point, like being fashionable becomes an important aspect of the game. You know, the fashion souls, the fashion hunting. That's an end game practice for many people to look nice. And if it's a serious goal for people, and then you start selling me pieces of armor, uh, no, that's wrong. I'm sorry. You are. It doesn't matter that it's only cosmetic at that point. You're interfering with my gameplay. You're interfering with my gameplay rotation by adding stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think you hit upon the right point, which is there's just an element of trust there that you're starting to you start to question the motivations behind everything, even if it seems pretty innocuous. Like, yeah, you start to ask, did you deliberately keep this out so that you could sell it and string me along for this stuff? Um, and that, like, I want to play games that are made by people who want to play that game. Like they're making the game that they want to play, or
Hmm.
that they've got in their head. So if you're if there's things that you can't do, like you and there's a lot of like balancing things I get, because you don't know, particularly let's say like with Elden Ring PvP, you don't know exactly how that's going to play out. And even with PvE, there's so many different variables that like maybe you don't realize that it's partly why you do playtesting. And when you release the game, that's like an even bigger playtest in a way. Like you're going to figure out things that, so those little tweaks, I get it, because that's stuff that you couldn't really know. Like you can always say, well, okay, you do more playtesting, you could be more thorough, but there's certain things that you're just going to find out when the game releases and you can't really know in advance. So little balancing things like that, I get. When it comes to, here's here's extra content, here's like what, an extra skin or an extra weapon or something like this, like you you weren't prevented from building that into the game. So either you thought it was unnecessary initially, or it wasn't important, and now you're trying to sell it to me because you're trying to sell me something that you don't think was important to the game, or you deliberately made the game worse because this was something that you thought was important and you left it out. So either way, I'm like now highly suspicious of your motivations for making this game.
I want to caveat that there are exceptions to this. Like if it's free and it's a known thing that you do, like Monster Hunter has these title updates that I mentioned that is expected to release after the game. They release new monsters for some reason. I don't actually know why it works like this, but it keeps well, nowadays I do know why, because when they do a title update, it gives them an excuse to release a bunch of cosmetic DLC that's paid. So I guess that's the reason today, but I don't know why they used to do it back in the day. But it's become like an expectation of the community. They want to hype up, oh, what's the next monster that's going to release? Is it something that we've seen before? I want this monster. I want this monster. So it's a community thing, and I think it's a healthy community thing. Apart from the excuse that gives them to add in a bunch of new cosmetics.
Yeah, I mean, and there are games that are designed around this. I mean, there's plenty of like, MMOs, which and other things like that where um, the live service model makes sense.
Yeah.
Where you're offering content, and that's sort of part of the idea behind it. I mean, I always liked the way, I don't know if you ever played RuneScape, but I used to play RuneScape a lot back in the day. And then they kept on like creating new versions and updating it and so on. And then at a certain point there was they were losing people, and it wasn't turning out all that great, and they came back with old school RuneScape, just like the original RuneScape. And then
A
they
lot of
have a
companies do that.
voting but this is the cool part. They have a voting system within the game so that every little change that they make to old school RuneScape is voted on by the player base.
Huh.
And so it's like, okay, old school RuneScape still can be updated and still can receive new stuff, but it needs this sort of community approval aspect of it, which there's too many incentives that go in the wrong direction. Like they're not all bad, but when it comes to live service, I mean, and this also gets into like, games preservation, and like I still don't I'm still not happy, even with all, as much as I respect FromSoft, I still don't like the idea that my disc of Elden Ring has a completely different game than what I play. Um, but there's just too many other incentives that are are suspicious and not motivated in the right direction, and I just get very uncomfortable whenever I see that. I would prefer to just you assuage my trust by giving me something that
I own.
I'll pay $60, I'll pay $100, whatever. Like I'll pay the right, the price that the game is worth, and then I have it and I can play it however I want, and I get to decide my approach to the game. You don't kind of hand me little breadcrumbs to keep me playing. Like I don't like that.
Yeah. Don't hack my brain, please. I paid you. I don't want to pay you to hack my brain.
Yeah.
I think I cut you off. Do you remember what you were talking about before we got into this conversation?
Oh boy. Well, I guess just to say that I don't think, like, separating out the kind of all this stuff about live service and cosmetic upgrades and buyable and all these sort of practices from something like, the Fortnite shrinking arena.
Mm.
Like, the Fortnite shrinking arena gameplay device is not why I don't really like Fortnite. that has nothing to do with it. That, I think, is a totally fine idea. That's just a gameplay design idea. So the fact that you see something like that in Nightrain, that doesn't mean that all the other stuff that you attribute to Fortnite is going to be in the game. So, like you were saying, like there's no, this is not live service. This is not, there's not going to be a battle pass or something like this. At least, as far as we know. And I will, if I see that, I will immediately criticize it. But, so I would just separate out like those kind of practices from like gameplay design. And if someone's inspired by, I like the idea of taking, cool gameplay ideas from games that have problems or are doing something else that's not great. I've been saying for a while that I would love to see Miyazaki do like an MMO, or I want to see FromSoft do all sorts of different things in terms of gameplay and design. That doesn't mean that they have to throw in the bad business practices along with that.
Yeah.
Those can be separate things.
Yeah, because when you say, oh, I would love for Miyazaki or FromSoftware to tackle this, you kind of, like, implicit in that statement is that you're tired of how other people are doing it, and you want to see how they do it, because they always do a good job. So, like, an example is I've been playing Knights of the Old Republic. I don't know if you've ever played it. I didn't know that it was a BioWare game when I started playing it. And, Dragon Age of the Veilguard just came out, and by all accounts, I didn't play it, but by all accounts, it's terrible, and I fully believe it. You just need to look at a trailer and see the Qunari and see the redesign for the Darkspawn. It looks like ass. But I'm playing this older BioWare game from back when BioWare was good, and I'm just like, wow. I never really mourned BioWare. Like it just kind of hit me. Wow, we're not getting anything like this anymore from that company. And so like you kind of get stuff like it with the cinematic experience with Baldur's Gate, something that does the BioWare cinematic character-driven dialogue well. But what about the combat? Nobody ever developed the BioWare combat. Maybe people don't think it's good. The only people that developed the BioWare combat was BioWare with, I guess, Mass Effect. They adapted to third-person shooter, and they refined it from Mass Effect 1 to 2 to 3. And it was, by the end of it, is really solid. It's a really solid gameplay system. And I don't think I almost ever see anybody do that specific tactical third-person combat on anything. And I was just like, it's been so long since I've seen it. It's a real shame if this might be the last time I ever see it. If I don't play any more old BioWare, like this is it. I would like to. So when I say something like, I'd like Miyazaki for somewhere to tackle this, sometimes I mean take this thing that somebody never really iterated on, and don't give me the same thing. Give me that FromSoftware iteration. Like, give me the FromSoftware spin on that same thing, and run with it.
Yeah, it's sort of the same principle behind, like, I would rather see a remake of a bad game than a remake of a good game, because
yeah,
I want to see how you can make, like, if everything is a mix of good and bad ideas and good and bad execution. If you take something that's did that all really well, like, what's the chance that you're going to make it any better? But if you have something that has some good ideas but has all these other things attached to it, like, I want to see you take those good ideas and turn them into something else. So just to bring it back to Nightrain, like, the concept of a shrinking arena is totally it's neither good nor bad on its own. It's just a game design idea. You can take that and turn it into a good game, and I don't know if Nightrain will, if that's the right concept for Nightrain, or if it'll be done well or anything. But you can separate that from any other thing that's attached to. You can have 500 different games that are totally different in quality and experience that use that same design concept. It's like a health bar. Like, you put a health bar in your game, that doesn't mean that it's going to be like every other game that has a health bar. This is just a mechanic that
Can be
can
done
be
well or
done well
poorly.
or poorly. Exactly.
Yeah. What? Just one last thing, probably on this Nightrain, on the fears for Nightrain. It's basically that. Let's say that even Nightrain comes out and you end up not liking it. I don't think that means that it's an indication of FromSoftware's downfall. It's like, oh, I said this is the end times. Now FromSoftware's going to suck from now on because they made Nightrain and I didn't like it. For like a couple of reasons. Number one, maybe you just don't like the kind of game. Maybe it's a quality game overall, but it isn't to everyone's palate. I expect it's not to everyone's palate. Not everybody liked Armored Core. Um, Even a lot of older Armored Core fans didn't necessarily like Armored Core. Um, but even apart from that, I had something else, but I've lost my train of thought.
Well, I mean, I could pick up from there. I think. I
Yeah.
mean, the if this is an indication that FromSoft is doing more and
Oh,
more varied things, then I think that's a good sign, not a bad sign.
you reminded me of what I was going to
Yeah.
say. This isn't really like other things. Like, it's not a battle royale. It has one mechanic that's similar to battle royales, and it's like, if I, what genre is this exactly? Like, what? When I think of what game is like this, the closest I could think of is Risk of Rain, 2. And Risk of Rain 2 is nothing like this. So maybe that's a good sign, because I can't actually think what game do you do something like this. So like the idea of like maybe running around gaining power and then having to deal with the boss at the end of the level, that's pretty Risk of Rain 2. But Risk of Rain 2 doesn't play like Elden Ring. It doesn't look or play anything like Elden Ring. And it certainly doesn't have what apparently is going to be a progression, character progression, and character stories, and an actual ending. So that's what I'm saying is it's hard to pin down exact. It's hard to say that. I don't think it would be fair to say that From Software is like being lazy or selling out or doing the same thing everyone else is doing, because I don't think anybody else is doing this, because I don't think that this is a common trend anywhere. I don't see this gameplay style all over the place.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, it's not gonna be their normal thing. So, Elden Ring is there's a basic template there that has been in the works since 2008 2009 with Demon Souls. um this is obviously taking a lot of assets and things, mechanics from that, but it's doing a different type of game. And this is something that's been in production for what, maybe a year and a half at the most. So this is going to be something different. And my view is like, it could be good, it could be bad. It might fit my my appetite or not. I will wait and see whether if it does things that are indications of bad design practices or bad, I don't know, like if they put in like a battle pass or something like this, I will start to be very critical and suspicious
If
of
it ends
them.
up being slop in any way, like, we'll be vocal.
Right. I don't see evidence of that yet. But apart from that, I like the idea that they as a company are trying out lots of different things. That's how you get, they've been iterating on the Souls formula for a long time. Now this is like a little branch off from that, where you take some of those elements and you do something totally different. And you could iterate on that. You could make 5 games in this type and get better and better at that, and then maybe that leads to something else. And this is all in the pursuit of making more interesting games. So to me, this is a good sign at this stage.
Okay, I think we basically agree. I was thinking maybe we'd have a slight disagreement somewhere, but again, we're just kind of agree on everything in Nightrain. Do you have anything else Nightrain related? Because otherwise, I'd like to talk about Shadow of the Erd Tree.
No, I think that's yeah, I mean, I guess the only thing is like I do worry that I'm just a little bit too like hyped that I'm maybe blind to something, but I feel, you know, there's two kinds of biases. So one is like being way too positive and one is being too negative and cynical. So um you know, as much as I may have rose-colored glasses on, I think all the people who are kind of like doom and gloom about it are also
Biased in a different direction.
biased in that. Yeah. And so, I mean, really, we don't know that much about this yet. I'm just excited to get something else from FromSoft.
I'm going to very rudely presume that there are people that are on this anti-Nightrain bandwagon that are also just kind of anti-Elden Ring in general. And it's not like this is new. Like, they've just been anti-FromSoftware for a while, and are using this as an opportunity to be like, I told you, it's all over. This is stagnation, rot everywhere. Because I have when I've asked them, you know, when I'm in my comments and I ask them, they don't even like Elden Ring. So I'm like, okay, but if you don't even like Elden Ring, then like, what are you talking about?
Why are you here? Yeah, no, that's probably true.
Okay, Shadow of the Erd Tree. Let us start wading in the muck on that. I guess I'll preamble a little. As you may know, I am extraordinarily frustrated. I still love Elden Ring, love Shadow of the Erd Tree, but I'm extremely frustrated with the lore I presumed, before the game came out, I predicted and I presumed that Shadow of the Erd Tree would have a lot of information that would make it a lot easier for me to interpret the lore of Elden Ring. And what kind of happened was the opposite. Not only did it not help me in understanding the story or even the base facts of the story, it kind of threw out a lot of the things that I thought I had pretty solid out the window and into the mud, into the garbage, and left me confounded and confused. So that's my thing right now. I do have some things I want to talk about, some specific stuff, but what's your impression? Where are you at with the lore?
With the lore,
are you happy with it? Did you like what was introduced in Shadow of the Erd Tree, and do you feel like you have a stronger understanding of it post DLC?
Yeah, I think what I said before the DLC came out is that basically it's probably going to answer a lot of questions and then introduce a lot of other questions, and that's basically where we ended up. I mean, I also have the same impression that like there were things that I thought I had a pretty good grasp on, even just like simple elements of the timeline or something, that I'm like, oh wait, is that is that actually true? How does that make sense? So yeah, definitely there were some surprising things. I do feel like it gave a lot more context to certain things, which I'm happy about. I'm happy about getting a lot of information about Marika's backstory, because I mean this has been my sort of soapbox, is that like Elden Ring is about Marika in a way that none of the other games have been about a singular person. Dark Souls is not about Gwyn in the same way. So the fact that we got a lot more information there. Now, what to make of that information is a different story.
Okay.
So I feel like I would almost be disappointed if it just gave me answers. And like, oh, now I understand Elden Ring fully. On the other hand,
Stockholm syndrome is what you have.
Could I have gotten? I will admit, like, could I have gotten some more clarity on some things, yes, definitely. um, so yeah, I guess I've mixed feelings about it. I would say overall very positive about where we are with the lore.
All right. So I'm going to ask you specific questions about, and I'll talk about some ideas that I have, and you
Okay.
tell me what you think is going on, and I will just defer to your. You're just going to tell me what happened in Elden Ring, and that's just gonna be how it is. That's just going to be how it is from now on. That's you're going
No
to tell me my
pressure.
opinion. Okay. So, Mother of Fingers, Mater. Is it Mater? Metyr?
Or Metyr, yeah.
Okay, Metyr, Mother of Fingers. What is going on with the fingers? What is with the Mother of Fingers? And I'll tell you what I think, I guess, but why don't you tell me what you think first?
What is going on there? I mean,
What's
so there's different.
what happened? Like, first of all, just like base what's give me a timeline of Metyr. What do you think happened with Metyr and in a relationship to Lands Between, Marika? Does she have anything to do with anything, or just what do you think happened with Metyr?
Um, I think the purpose of Metyr is more about a thematic thing about abandonment and motherhood. Um, as far as the timeline goes, I think her arrival is way early, before basically anything relevant, um, to the story of the game. I think, and this is, I would say, partly speculation, but I think it's highly suggested that the two fingers are people who are sort of, let's say, transformed and adopted by her. Um, and I think the fact that we actually got information about that, and also
What makes you think the two
basically,
fingers are people that got adopted by Metyr?
there's a bunch of different things. I mean, there is, I think it's the fingerprint nostrum item, which says something about like people who tried to turn into fingers. And then you get like the gesture, which is, someone sort of kneeling and putting their hands up in the air in a manner that, if you imagine they sort of transformed, that they would turn into something looking like two fingers. Um, and then you get like Ymir sort of becoming this new mother of fingers. He's going through this transformation. Um, uh, so there might have been something else that I'm forgetting. Oh, and I mean, actually, he gives a little bit more context to that talisman in the base game, which
Where it
depicts the
has
two fingers
legs,
with like little
little
legs.
legs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I feel like there was, it's circumstantial, but I feel like that was basically what was implied there, is that, um,
Do you do you
and
think there's a reason
the,
why that it has these adopted finger children?
yeah, I mean, I think the idea is, so this gets into the greater will, but let's, leaving aside what the greater will is exactly, right? Metyr has some contact with the greater will and then loses that, becomes discarded and abandoned. And then the two fingers are a sort of attempt to reconnect. And the implication is that this is kind of a futile effort. There's that one of my favorite descriptions, which is the broken and discarded are fully willing to cling to fleeting simulacra, earning them some modicum of sympathy, which is a great item description.
Which
But
item
I
is
think I
that?
think that I think it's the microcosm spell.
Okay, yes. Yeah.
So I think the idea is I mean, I could get, this depends on where you want to go with this, but I mean, the concept of the greater will, let's just say at least it's associated with this idea that there is this sort of greater order, this greater divine sort of plan for everything.
Hmm.
And and basically it's about, I think, faith in that concept. And so the two fingers are sort of clinging to this idea that there is this, yes, there's this great divine plan for everything. And they're basically kind of delusional. Whether the greater will was actually ever something like a conscious entity or not, at least now, and for basically all the events of the game, I think they're totally disconnected from that. And so they're sort of priests that are acting
Yes.
off their own agenda.
Yeah. Okay. So I agree with that. Let me put to you one of my more, see, because when Shadow of the Erdtree came out, I didn't make any videos really. I wasn't confident in any of this stuff, but I have a lot of weird ideas that I never went anywhere with, and probably won't go anywhere with because I'm not sure. But among them is something like this. So the remembrance for Metyr talks about how it was the first shooting star to land in the lands between. Okay, and it's a gleaming golden child of the greater will. And there's another description that says that it definitely did talk to the greater will. Like 100% did speak to it. So the greater will did have a use for Metyr at one point, at the very least, and was working through it and did speak to it. And then you have the Elden Stars, which we thought was like the first event that happened, but apparently it wasn't. Well, the Elden Stars, I thought a long time about how can you like put the two things together. But the description of the Elden Stars actually says that the Greater Will sent a golden star bearing a beast into the lands between. And then I was like, well, hang on, that doesn't actually conflict. If Metyr is the star, and the star is bearing a beast, then Metyr is bearing the beast that would later become the Elden Ring. And so, like, the two things need not conflict. So what if Metyr lands into the lands between, and it does have the beast, and like it's bearing it, and it's a mother, so maybe it's carrying it in a kind of pregnancy way. And then I start thinking, the seed talisman, the crimson seed talisman that you see in the DLC, has the two fingers. It shows the two fingers, and it talks about the beginning of the Erdtree. And there's an implication, I suppose, that if Marika made the Erdtree, and the fingers are associated with the beginning of the Erdtree, and it's about a crimson seed, then maybe it gave Marika the seed. And then I start thinking about the seduction and betrayal line that was talked about earlier. And so the crazy idea starts forming. Maybe Marika took the gold from Metyr, and the gold is the beast. In the early trailers, when people were speculating, a lot of people thought it looked like Marika was taking it from a pregnant belly. And then I looked at it. If you squint, it kind of looks like the wrinkles aren't clothes, maybe, but the fingerprints of Metyr. So it could be from the eye of Metyr, or it could be from the belly. Metyr's belly is like open and wounded. And so then I start thinking, if the beast became the Elden Ring at one point, what if it was those golden strands? What happens when Marika takes the strands? She holds them above her head, and it becomes the lower arc, the lower arc of the Elden Ring. Yeah, takes the things. It's the lower arc of the Elden Ring, and the crimson seed have the two fingers on it, and they form the shape of a lower arc beneath the seed in the talisman. We know that Metyr did receive signs at one point, and then became broken and abandoned. And then is not able to hear the voice of the greater will. And then the two fingers can at some point. So the two finger, well, maybe. We don't know exactly if they ever did, but we do have the coded sword that talked about how it used to be youthful. It used to spin with light, and it was vigorous, like it was confident, like it really did know what the greater will wanted. So we have a situation where Metyr could talk to the greater will, was damaged, lost the ability to talk to the greater will. The two fingers seem like they could talk to the greater will at one point in time, and continue to be able to do so until they become damaged. And their damage, I think, comes from age. There's several item descriptions that talk about how they became old, and that might be the reason that they can't talk to Gideon's Lord's protection, maybe. Spell incantation says that, and the Coded Sword also talks about how they're bent with age, and how their age is what makes them that way. I still think that maybe the greater will is too far away to talk about, because they do speak with light. And that would explain why, we're moving further and further away from the greater will. And that's symbolic not only literally because the greater will is in space, it's also symbolic that we're getting further and further away from the origin of, as civilization progresses and individuality becomes a thing, we get further and further away from what the greater will wants, I suppose. Like there's it's not a collective unconsciousness. It's not, or maybe even divine teaching, like maybe further from the source of divine teaching. So those are metaphorical ideas, but for what actually happens in the game, what do you think about the idea that Metyr was the thing that was betrayed, and Marika and the fingers took it from her?
I hadn't considered the idea that the two fingers would have been, opposed to Metyr. That's an interesting one. I would say the thing is, one of the more confusing parts of Marika's story is the Elden Ring depiction in Farum Azula. Because I think that there's different theories that you can come up with, but I think that just the most face value theory would be that statue is a statue of Marika in Farum Azula underneath the Elden Ring.
Yeah, I think she's bullshitting about Godfrey being the first Elden Lord that she was even aware of. I think she's been around since the beginning, and she is the god that fled, and she used to be the consort of Placidus X.
Yeah, I don't even know if it's necessarily consort, but I think clearly she had some relationship with Farum Azula. And I would just say, just as evidence of that being Marika, like face value, this is a depiction of the Elden Ring. There's 3 wolves, and Malekith stands in front. We know that Marika is currently the vessel of the Elden Ring. Malekith is her half-brother, and wolves are the shadows of the Empyrean. So that, you can come up with other ideas. It's Mikola time traveling or whatever, but like probably that is Marika.
Face value, that's Marika.
And also, I think Malekith and Sarosh, I would also say, it's always hard to come to like a definitive conclusion, but I think Sarosh appears to be related to Farum Azula. So there's some part of Marika's history which involves Farum Azula. And if Placidus X was Elden Lord before the Erd Tree, then somehow that transition of power has to involve Farum Azula, Placidus X, Godfrey, and Marika. That's all connected there. I don't know exactly what happened, but something like that she was the god that fled, or something along those lines.
She has to have some connection.
So as far as what she's doing in because in the story trailer, I think it's important that what's depicted there is the arc, is the rune arc, because the idea with the depiction of the Elden Ring in Farum Azula, like, okay, there could be lots of different ideas there, but I think definitely there's a concept of sort of receiving blessings from above, because there's the upper arc, and then those filter down.
Yeah.
Right? And versus the new version of the Elden Ring, where all the blessings are held within. Right? So that's sort of at least the symbolic difference between those two. And I think what you see in the story trailer is Marika sort of creating that bottom arc, rather than like creating the Elden Ring itself or something, which means that there must have been already the Elden Ring um, in some form or another. So could that still be Metyr? You know, there was I don't know if you saw this, but there was a post on, I think, DeviantArt, by an artist who worked on that story trailer. And she said, you know, oh, I did some of like the blood stains and things in the trailer for the baby diaper. um, and then everybody was like, oh my God, what?
Baby
And then
diaper.
later, she actually changed it. She just replaced it with cloth later.
Okay.
I don't know, more vague or something.
Okay. So, okay, that's definitely
So,
not Metyr.
well, so, you know, what could that be? I think at least assuming that, you know, you wouldn't necessarily tell an artist on that exactly what's going on, or, you know, you could be very vague with how you give them instructions for what they're doing. Like, I don't think it's literally a diaper, but but I
But it
would
could be
say
a
that
swaddling cloth. We have examples.
swaddling cloth.
Yeah.
Exactly. So something like that, rather than, so I think that at least puts to rest the idea that it was like a snake or something.
Yeah.
That this is something about, you know,
I'm glad you told
a
me about that. I
child,
didn't
a
know about
pregnant
that.
woman.
Yeah.
So, however, if this is something I've been thinking about, is like, okay, if the two fingers were people, could Metyr have been a person as well? Like, clearly people transform into all sorts of crazy things. What she looks like now doesn't necessarily reflect what she once was.
You think
And
she's the
also weird,
Gloom-Eyed Queen?
um,
Because the
well,
fucking black flame symbol
the
is a
black flame symbol
fingerprint
is a fingerprint.
with a little eye in the middle that looks just like Metyr's eyeball.
So yeah, there's definitely a connection there.
Yeah.
And like, also, you know, we encounter her in like some weird parallel dimension, so it's not like this is not like reflective of that she was always this way. So could that have been Metyr? That's I'm not sure. It's a good thought though. I mean,
The finger on the black flame really is suspicious, though. I was looking at that a little while ago. That is oddly suspicious. Like, why is it shaped specifically like a fingerprint? The eye in the center is very, you know, it's the little dot in the middle of a finger.
yeah, and even like Yolan's armor, the armor of night, which looks, I mean, it's black. There's not really relation to black flame per se, but that, I think, literally says it's a fingerprint design.
Yeah.
So there's some connections there, and I would also say, you know, Marika's children are all sort of cursed in a manner that reflects her sins, so to speak, right? Like, she goes and kills all the horn scent. She has Omen children. She kills the fire giants, and she has like children with visions of fire. I don't know exactly about the timeline here, but she has all these curses. Now, with the snakes, it could be that if she killed the Gloom-Eyed Queen, and the Gloom-Eyed Queen seems to have some relationship to snakes,
Yeah.
that maybe that's a result of like having killed some snake-related deity, having killed the Gloom-Eyed Queen, maybe. I mean, I still like the idea that Marika is intimately connected with the Gloom-Eyed Queen in some way. But one way that this could work is if you look at the previous version of the trope about Black Flame, which is Frida. Part of the idea there is that Frida is impersonating someone. She sort of adopted the role of someone, and you could see
She's pretending to be like Velka.
Well, yeah, so Marika could be kind of adopting the role of this mother, which, I mean, that is sort of what she is, right? She's like the great mother archetype in the Lands Between. It could be that Metyr was maybe even the the depiction that we see in Rao of this like giant mother goddess figure, and that she sort of usurped that role. So that yeah, this gets into pretty wild theorizing, but I'm not totally sure where I stand on some of that.
Okay, let's ask some maybe related questions. Maybe we'll circle back to it. So like Messmer, I now kind of think that Messmer was around for most, like he's the firstborn, and I think he was around for a great deal of time before he was stuck in the lands between, to the point where I think he participated in the Fire Giants War, and that's why the Messmer like spears are impaling so many of the Fire Giants. Do you think that's? Do you have a? Do you disagree with that?
I think again, I think face value that seems likely, and I think also with the timeline, one thing which I'm now going back to cut content, which I sort of slightly dismissed, and there was an early version which said like Radon, Slayer of Giants, and because of the idea of the timeline I had in my head, I was like, oh no, that's just cut content. That doesn't make any sense. Now I'm like, well, no, maybe he was around. Maybe he was around Giants as well.
Yeah, because we have Messmer, and we know that Radon and Messmer knew each other, and we know that they grew. Radon and the Albinauric grew up like siblings, I guess. Was the Albinauric or Messmer and him that grew up like siblings? One or the other.
Yeah, Messmer and Gaius were as elder brothers to the line.
Yes.
Yeah,
which is crazy. Like that blew all of my timeline opinions out of the water. When
all the timeline stuff is much more confusing now, I'd say. But I think a lot of the stuff I'm trying to sort of zoom out a little bit and just look at like, I think they're trying to communicate certain things. If you just don't get lost in the weeds, zoom out and look at things at face value, that's probably what it is. So something like that statue in Farum Azula is probably Marika. When you have a bunch of people impaled by something, it's probably the guy who's called the Impaler. Like,
yeah, the weeds
you
really
can come up with all sorts of crazy ideas, but like that's probably it.
Yeah, the weeds have gotten to me. Like I can't see anything. There's only weeds in front of my eyes these days when it comes to this lore. Okay. The Fell God is the sun. Do you agree with that?
I don't know if I would go so far to say that the Fell God is the sun, but to say that he sort of is maybe a manifestation, or he resides within it, or he is the kami of the sun or something like this. I think that is where I'm at.
Right. And I guess since this is a podcast, I'll clarify for anybody that doesn't know. Like the reason I say that is because the first thing I found in the DLC was the Furnace Visage, and it said stone mask surrounded by curled horns depicting the fell god of fire that haunts the sagas of the Hornset. And it looks like the sun that what is his name?
Dung Eater medallion.
Yeah, it looks like the Dung Eater's medallion, and the Dung Eater's medallion specifically calls it a sun. So
yeah, and I think also the Flame of the Fell God incantation looks like a sun, and it says that the Fell God resides within the flame. So I think there's other connections. I think there is. See, part of the reason with what you were saying about the Elden Stars description with the golden star and the beast, I'm inclined to think that the golden star was the sun.
Okay.
Because I think you could also look at the sun as having sort of two separate elements to it. One being sort of a giant ball of burning fire, sort of, and this goes back to sort of the symbolism found within Dark Souls. Like the sun is kind of representative of the first flame, but it's also this sort of golden, brilliant light. And so the idea of gold and also fire deriving from sort of the same thing, which you also see throughout the DLC with like the boats that are sort of on fire, but it's sort of producing gold. There's all sorts of other examples of that kind of thing.
There's a lot of things like primeval gold seems to be red. There's a lot of the older the gold, like the Crucible Knight's armor. The older the gold, the The dragon's lightning is considered gold, but the primeval lightning is red. So yeah, there seems to be like an association with early gold is red.
Yeah, red tinged at least.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
I mean, there's lots of places where gold and fire are connected, and I think it also just sort of makes obvious sense in the sense that, like, gold is something that is used in forging, and it's a metal that you have to melt and turn into things. So fire and gold being kind of connected, and also, there's meteoric ore is such an important uh, item, resource, and you have blue white meteoric ore, and then you have gold meteoric ore, and that's
Right.
another sort of duality, and the fates of the gods must be controlled by amber starlight and all this sort of stuff. So I think the idea of the sun being this sort of central star, and that from that derives sort of fire and also gold, I think makes a lot of sense.
Then what do you make of the conflict between the fell god and Marika? If the sun bore the beast that became the Elden Ring, um, what's the connection between the fell god Marika and the beast? Why do you think the star? What's the connection you're making here with the sun being the star? Why would that be the case?
Well, I think you could see it. I this is sort of the thing that I'm working on. So since the DLC came out, I haven't released any videos because I've just been like processing everything for a while, and this is the part that I'm really trying to work out. So there's kind of a lot of different elements involved. I think one thing is that the forge is a much more critical part of the story in my view.
Okay.
For I mean, one aspect of this, which is that obviously it holds the flame of ruin, which burns the Erd tree, but it's also a forge, which means that it was used to create something. And in my mind, basically the only two reasonable options for what it created were either the Elden Ring or the Ancient Dragons. And I'm
Oh.
inclined to think, and possibly both, but one of the things that I was really happy about with the DLC, so just to kind of get some context here, was all of the RAW stuff.
Yeah.
Because this sort of gets like we're going into ancient history, and therefore we can look at a lot of things like what is not there, what is not present, and what is present, what things they chose to focus on for that area. One of the items that stood out to me was the spirit calculus, which is I don't know if you even found this or but there's an item called the spirit calculus, which you can use to craft. And the spirit calculus, by the way, is only dropped by specific horned beasts within the RAW area, and it's a super, super rare drop. And then you can use it to craft sprite stones by also using RAW burrows, which are also not easy to find. And then if you do that, you can also use the bond stone, which is a weird item to make the sprite stone explode. And it's like this totally weird, like complicated mechanic
Yeah.
that is totally useless. And like I've been trying to I farmed for hours to get those spirit calculus, and then I tried using them in PvP, and they just suck. I mean, it's just terrible.
Yeah.
So like this is this weird obscure thing that they really wanted to include, obviously not for gameplay reasons. So I was thinking about that, and then a channel called Nameless Singer did a video on RAW, which was really excellent. And basically, I think the idea, what that got me thinking about was about parallels to Sekiro, and this idea about the flow of water being really important to the RAW civilization. It's all about aqueducts and rivers and this sort of stuff, and that's why you have like the ruin-strewn precipice and all of this stuff. It's all about channeling water in different ways, and all the ruins are there's water coming out of them and this sort of stuff. So the channeling of water, and then relating that to the idea in Sekiro of kind of the fountainhead and all the waters that kind of come down, and how water sort of carries impurities and picks up things along the way. And as it flows, this is sort of a good, healthy thing. And then as it rests at the bottom, it stagnates. And if you just follow that chain of logic to its conclusion, then it means that really the lake at the top of the mountain tops of the giants is like really key. And what we know about that area is, one, that the fire is like not raging anymore, which probably in my mind means that this area was not totally frozen, that that lake was full of water, and that the rivers actually ran at one point. And the other thing that we know is that fire blossoms are fertilized by cinders from the forge. And so my idea is that basically cinders from the forge sort of percolated out into the lake and then are carried down through this river system throughout the lands between, which is basically sort of the flow of the Crucible, you could say. This is this flow of
literally the flow of the Crucible, since it's coming from the forge.
The Crucible currents.
Wow.
Yeah. And so then that means that whatever was in the forge, whatever they were forging, is really important. And another great
it also lends to your point that the Elden Ring, like Radagon and Marika, use the hammer to both try to repair it and to break it. And they hit it like it's metal on the forge when they do.
Yeah. There's a physical. I mean, obviously it's a metaphysical kind of thing, but there's a physicality to it. It's made of, it's a golden ring, right? And this goes back to like parallels with the Norse Eddas and that the Ring of the Nibelungen. The other really interesting observation that I found was someone made a video looking at the forge itself, and there's a whole story there which I completely missed. So if you look at the forge, it's like a bowl, and there are these little serpent heads, and the serpent heads are on three corners, but one corner is missing, and there's like sort of a hole there. And for each of those serpent heads, there's a chain attached. And the way the chain works is there's a totally circular chain that is attached to the serpent head, and then a bunch of sort of rectangular chain links attached to that circular chain. And so when you go up the forge, you go up this chain to reach the forge. And what you find is that the part that's embedded into the rock, into the mountain, is a circular chain. So, and if you actually, this guy counted the links in the chain, and what you find is that basically the chain that you walk up must have attached to the opposite side of the forge where there was another serpent head, and the two chains on the side, which are half the length of the one that you walk up, must have been one chain that connected in the middle, and that at some point these were broken and something sort of burst out the side, some explosive force, and knocked that other serpent head out and knocked this chain all the way over to the mountain and kind of wound around a little bit and then embedded in the rock. And so the reason that you would put chains on a forge is because you're trying to keep something in, maybe a lid, but there's something in the forge. So what this all paints a picture of to me is that there's something really important happening in the forge that would, needed to be kept locked shut, and then this sort of exploded outwards. And I think that fire is basically what sort of fertilized the water with whatever, the cinders of gold of some kind, and that sort of spreads throughout the lands. And that's why like the beasts in Rao, they drink the water, and then they get some of these impurities, they get some of these life, this life energy or whatever, and it kind of manifests in them as the spirit calculus. It kind of builds up like a bezoar or something, and they develop these horns because they're getting this extra life energy, and then that's the whole sort of flow of life throughout the lands between. And that's actually, I think, what the Farum Azula Elden Ring depicts, is not necessarily roots, but a system of
I see.
currents
I see.
from the blessings of what was in the forge kind of spreading downwards.
Right. Not pooling at the lower arc. I see. I have changed my
So
mind. I
yeah.
want an Elden Ring too. I need another. I need another crack. I need more. I need. Yeah. Okay. You've convinced me. I've been like anti Elden Ring 2. We don't. No, we don't need an Elden Ring 2. Like they're done. Let them do something else. No. No. I think I want another one. Maybe not right now, but eventually.
Yeah. So I mean, there's still plenty of things that I'm still trying to work out, and things that we may not have a good answer to. But like that, the observations that I saw of this guy's, I think his name was Prof.
Can you link me
Observations that
that
this guy made about.
after?
Sure, I'll send it to you.
Yeah.
Um, Observations like that about the forge, which is something that we've had for a long time, and I never put any of that together. So there's still stuff that people are like, that's a whole story there. When you look at those chains, that to me is sort of, this is not really wild speculation. This is just sort of good detective work. So there's still plenty of things that I think just through observation and sort of piecing things together can be understood. I don't feel like I don't feel like this is a futile
You're not dooming like
effort.
I am.
No. No, I still feel like, I don't know everything yet. I don't have a good place to stand on with the lore exactly, but there's pieces that are being put together, and I feel like I'm still progressing in understanding things.
Hmm. Okay. Let's stay on the same topic then, since we're still on it. Why do you think the fell god of fire visage has omen horns? Why is it connected to omen horns?
Well, if I'm right about basically the cinders from the forge kind of fertilizing the water, and this is basically the crucible, like the way I envision it is you have a crucible, like the forge is a type of crucible, but the sort of the energy of the crucible, the primordial matter that's referred to, is sort of what was inside of that forge, and then that percolates down through the lands, through the water, and people drink the water. Then the growth of horns is something that happens from sort of imbibing some of that essence. This is what the horned beasts do. They drink the water as it's flowing down all these waterfalls in Rao. And, Bellerot, there, there's all these waterfalls in there as well, and it's becoming kind of stagnant. So it's this sort of, again, similar to Sekiro, it's like Mibu Village or something. There's this sort of divine water which, as it's flowing, it kind of becomes more, it picks up impurities, or it becomes more stagnant as it pools in certain places. And then it's imbibing those impurities which produces the horns, this sort of sign of both divinity, but also kind of, it's not total purity. There's something kind of impure about it. So that would sort of connect all of the horn related stuff with the flame of the fell god, and perhaps with the sun itself. This is a more wild speculation part of the theory, but I sort of liked the idea that the giants, let's say the Titans maybe, because I think the forge is probably built by them, that it's sort of a Prometheus myth of stealing the fire of the sun in
I
order to
see.
kind of, and you imagine that's both fire and it's gold at the same time, and then that is basically what becomes the Elden Ring. So from the fire, from the cinders, from the impurities, you get horns, because they're sort of further down the food chain, so to speak. They're further down in this process of, things that are divine are up top, and then as they go down, they get more and more impure. So it's related to that. And it's related to the fell god, and they're all kind of interconnected in that way.
One of the things that always made me the thing with the horns is that the Omen curse seems to be like associated with what, revenge maybe, because it's not just a thing that happens because of primordialness in the horn scent. It's also like hang on, where is it? So the Dung Eater's whole thing with his seedbed curses, he's able to make the horns grow on people. He's able to defile corpses, and then the seedbed curse grows on the corpses, and they're full of Omen horns. And he can cause that to happen to anybody by defiling their corpses. And there's this idea that they will be, they won't be able to associate with the Earth Tree by this happening to them, and their children will also be affected by this, and their children's children. Their whole line of descendants will be tainted by this, and I kind of just want to ignore that. Like I look at that and I was like, man, that's just like a weird thing. But then in the DLC, you got the ghosts. There's a ghost in. Where is this ghost? Where's this stupid ghost? I don't remember where he is. Yes, he's by the Scorched Ruins, the very beginning of the DLC, and he says, he's talking to the trees and the people that were hanged by Messmer, and he says, "I know your resentment lingers yet, the raw stuff from which I will surely forge a curse upon the dastard," Messmer says, "upon Marika's children, each and all." So he talks about a curse that he's going to weave through the resentment that they feel at being killed. And then the final thing is the Grandam talks about that the curse will get Marika and her children, and then she says the curse of the Omen. And then I'm like, well, fuck, how do you even know that word? I did not think you would know that word. I was under the impression that the word omen would be a pejorative that existed in the lands between, to refer to the horns, not necessarily that you as a horn scent that lives in the horn scent area would know that word and it be a real thing, and you yourself are calling it a curse. And is it the same Omen curse that we were talking about in the lands between? Is it the growing of horns? Is it related to the way that the Dung Eater talks about it? Because all of them seem to be tied to resentment, and all of them seem to be tied to revenge.
Yeah, so I think there's two elements to this. So I think one thing is that the horns are a sign of divinity in Hornscent society, but they're not a untrammeled positive thing, because you have things like there's some reference to like children on which the horns grow too much, they basically die from that. Mm-hmm. And I think the parallel here would be something like the Old Blood in Bloodborne, where it's not exactly just a divine thing on its own, but it's also about your internal state. So there's like the Hornscent Society is about a lot of different things, but they're very you have like asceticism, sort of denial of earthly desires, which is a path towards spirituality. And then you also have like sort of trial by combat, so to speak, this defeating beasts and invoking them divinely. But it's this kind of almost this sort of primitive focus on like both in terms of the warriors, like channeling primal energy channeling beasts and this sort of stuff, and these sort of wild dances,
Mm.
and then also this kind of search for spirituality. And I think so. I think the horns themselves are not. It's not like, horns are bad or good or anything like this, but it's the horns are a byproduct of basically taking in some kind of life essence. It's like the old blood, where it is a something that can transform. And so with the Omen curse, this is sort of this is about resentment. It's about, sort of being distanced from the Erd tree. And also I would say Dung Eater specifically is not actually an Omen.
Nope.
But he sort of models himself after them because I think because they're so reviled, because there's something that he just wants to mire in all this filth. And so everything that the Golden Order despises, he wants to put at the top of the hierarchy. As far as the horn scent are concerned, I think like the Omen curse, I will say that the last protagonist pointed out that the word there is actually different in Japanese. So what Grandam says versus like how the Fel Omen are referred to, or like part of it's missing. So it's not exactly the same. But I think the idea is basically like horns are growing horns, like just on face value doesn't seem like a great thing. Right. So why would you believe that like horns are a sign of divinity? Well, part of it I think has to do with this like asceticism and struggle. Like this is a burden that you carry, essentially, these horns. It's a sign of going through some transformation that is inflicting something upon you, and you are bearing it. So in a way it's almost like flagellation or something. It's a sign that like you're bearing a cross or something like this. So as far as the horn scent are concerned, they have the horns, and it's almost like a curse to them, but it's the act of sort of bearing that curse which is divine. Whereas with Dung Eater, he's just saying, no, everybody's going to be cursed now. Fuck y'all, basically. So
Yeah, but he has the power to inflict, like they all seem to have the power to inflict it upon other people, without having to have a lineage to it, with resentment being the thing that makes it grow. I'm always looking at a metaphorical view of this thing. Like I told you my theories on what was it? I've told you like a lot of stuff. The last one was the those who live in death, and how they have like how I think they have like a metaphorical association with just losers, and that's what they actually represent on some level. So the thing with the Omen, I'm going to ramble a little bit, but because all three of the people that talk about turning resentment on your enemies and cursing them with it, like the three examples that I gave, I think that maybe it has to do with, like, it's literally revenge, perhaps. Like, most bullies are bullied. I think that's a true statistic. Like, most people that become bullies were bullied at some point in their lives. And so there's like this propagation of damage. You can damage something, and then it doesn't heal. Like, you can damage a person or a thing, and it's just damaged now, and then it in turn damages other things. And so there's a lineage thing that's talked about in all three cases. Marika, the ghost and the Grandam talk about how Marika and her children, like that her lineage is going to be affected by this Omen curse that seems to be based on revenge and resentment. The Dung Eater is very different than the those who live in death, because those who live in death aren't exactly looking out for revenge. They just want to stop the persecution of those who live in death. They want to, the low and the meek and the many. That's their thing. The Dung Eater wants revenge, like specifically wants revenge against the Golden Order. and so does the Grandam, and so does the Ghost. And so they talk about how the Dung Eater defiles things, and like you see their groins all bloodied whenever you look at the corpses that he's mutilated. And I think that there's a thing here where like revenge corrupts people and their children because they take it out on their children. They take it out on the people around them. Like you can damage someone badly enough that they damage everything else around you down their lineage, and that's your revenge. Like that's your revenge that goes on in perpetuity. So I think that has something to do with it. I think that I'm not saying that I'm not discounting it all. I think you're right about the impurities in the Crucible, the impurities that flow outward. But I also think that specifically this manifestation of it, like the Omen curse itself, and the way that they keep inflicting it, this is a revenge point that's being emphasized.
Yeah, I mean, I think the revenge theme, I think, is actually much broader than just this as well. There's sort of different variations of that, because I mean, one of the really interesting things, surprising things to me about the DLC was all of the Midra and Flame of Frenzy stuff. Because, I felt like, oh, that story was done. We did everything about that, right? And then it's like, no, actually, this is a major part of what we want to talk about this time. And that also seems to, I mean, and I always go back to your video about this where you read Dostoevsky. The idea of like sort of harboring resentment or revenge against sort of existence itself, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another form of having this resentment, and I think there's sort of a Buddhist idea of, it's like these. This is why I compared with the horn stuff to the old blood, because the idea in Bloodborne was like the old blood can help you ascend spiritually, but only if you have the right sort of internal, if you are spiritually aligned correctly or whatever, if you're willing to transcend, and if you're not, then it's basically just going to turn you into a beast, and you're just going to be stuck in this sort of primal mode of being. And
that is very Buddhist. You're right. Yeah.
So it's yes, there's like magical items and substances and stuff in Elden Ring, and there's a certain way the magic works, but a lot of it has to do with your internal state. And so, harboring revenge, it's like, well, you were wronged, and then now you want to inflict that upon others. But if you were to really sort of spiritually transcend that, then you wouldn't be cursed by that wrong, because it's only if you continue that cycle where you're like continuing to keep that sin against you as like a continuous thing. So if you, like Marika, taking revenge on the horn scent, so then this allows this evil thing to propagate, because she's making something of it, instead of like, if you make peace, like Radigan and Renala, it's all the transgressions are forgiven. It's you can transcend that, you can rise above it, and then that sort of allows their children to be fine, essentially.
No, that's good. I like that a lot. And that I think that goes with reality, because while most children that are bullies were bullied, most kids that get bullied don't become bullies. I think that's also true. So yes. Yes, I agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is it's like, the Buddhist idea, the cycle of samsara. I should say, if you haven't seen them, Easer Aesthetics has been doing some videos looking at themes of FromSoftware games, like comparing Dark Souls and Demon Souls and Sekiro and Bloodborne, and sort of looking at the same idea across all these games, and those have been fantastic. And he does sort of talk about a lot of this kind of stuff, enlightenment and madness, and how these all kind of these relate, I think, to a lot of Buddhist ideas, or like general Buddhist concepts, which mostly Buddhism is really just a kind of psychotherapy. It's not a very religious religion compared to a lot of other religions, and these are just, I think, sort of truths that if you attach yourself to an idea or some harm that has been done to you, if you're constantly thinking about some harm that has been done to you, and that justice must be enacted against this, that you need to take revenge against it,
Yeah.
it sort of inflates that harm. Whereas if you go, okay, that was done, I'm gonna,
Yeah.
that passed, I'm gonna move on, then it sort of lessens it and it diminishes it.
Yeah, this is a thing that yeah, I love that. I love that you mentioned that. Yeah, it's very clear. Okay, the trailer for fucking the Bloodborne DLC, Curse the Fiends, their children too, forever and ever and ever. Don't never let them fucking forget either. It's a constant thing that Miyazaki talks about in all his games. The idea of like, no, I was wronged. They got to be punished forever. Doesn't matter. And then and then it shows the consequences of that. With the person suffering is usually the one that's the angriest about it.
Yeah.
The one that didn't let it go.
Yeah, and I think more and more I kind of I think a big part of the whole, like, when you look at Elden Ring, like, there's you start getting lost in the weeds of the timeline and all this stuff, and then like some of the big stuffs you kind of forget about, like, what does it mean to be Elden Lord? Like, what is that exactly? But I think actually an element of that might be kind of being an arbiter of justice in a way, that because like order is a way of allowing those things to be forgotten, because it's like, no, there's an order to how society works. If we all just continue the cycle of violence and revenge, then this kind of devolves into chaos. And so if you have a leader who sort of enacts or brandishes the rules of the world, like, this is how things are going to go, this is how everyone's going to be treated, then that's a kind of imparting of justice. And I think that angle of it, I didn't really think about, but with the DLC that feels more relevant.
Yeah. I've got you've gotten me a lot of ideas. There's some books I need to reread now that you've got me thinking on that tangent. I don't want to say anything, but that's a good idea.
Okay.
Because it'll probably be stupid. That's why I don't. It's not to hide. It's probably going to be stupid. So that's what I'm not saying anything. Okay, let's keep going down my list. Abyssal Serpent. Why? Why is there an Abyssal Serpent? And what differentiates Messmer's fire from the other fires that we already had plenty of?
Yeah, this is probably the thing that I'm the most I don't have any clear, like, this is what I believe. There's lots of different, like, metaphorical angles and also logistical angles. There clearly was a serpent deity that existed before the Erd Tree. There's the god devouring serpent, which seems to be either the same or related to the one with the snakeskin found in Bonnie Village, which would imply a relation to Messmer. There's a whole bunch of things here that are sort of odd connections that I still don't know exactly what to make of. One is when you see the sort of mass behind Messmer's eye, it looks very similar to the caterpillar mask that Hornsent wears. Um, and there's a whole thing with sort of worms and things behind the eye. There was some cut content regarding Yura, where he's talking about, you know, the worms that are eating his eyes and his brain. And that also might relate to the Flame of Frenzy. So there's like a lot of different weird connections. My most like unhinged, crazy idea was that there's some meteoric space worms that started infesting people's brains, and that's the whole plot of Elden Ring. I don't actually think that, but no. As far as the Abyssal Serpent goes, the problem that I have is I don't know how to make sense of all the different parts of it, because we basically have, there's a serpent which is eating the dark kindling. So there's something made of darkness which serves as kindling for the fire. The serpent is eating the kindling, and this is what is sealed. Both the kindling and the serpent are sealed within Messmer, as well as the original sin. So there's like 5 different things going on there, and I'm not entirely sure what it is.
And then there's his good serpents that are his
right. Winged serpents are great.
Yeah, yeah.
So I mean, I think there's a few like different symbolic readings that you could put on this. Obviously, there's sort of a Adam and Eve parallel here. The serpent, which tries to convince Eve essentially to aspire after a kind of godhood, right? Because that's the serpent's lines to Eve is about, you know, this is not going to curse you. Essentially, it's going to make you more like God. That you'll know the nature of good and evil. So there could be something there where the seduction and that's referred to could be something about Marika being seduced by the power of the serpent. There's also, I think, a reasonable theory that the serpent could have been like a kind of jar. Because we know that it works sort of like one for Rykard, right? It's blending life together as family.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's possible that that could have been, and that would be, you know, connection with the snakeskin and Bonnie Village. There's also, I think, the idea that the winged serpents, you know, things that fly are closer to the heavens, they're more divine, and therefore the base serpent, this is sort of something that crawls along the ground, and this could have a relation to the dragons. So there's like so many different strands to this that I'm not really sure which one
to start pulling on.
Pull on.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I really don't know. This one specifically like threw me for a loop. There's a lot about. This is basically my problem. I can start going unhinged on things, and you know, I can start pulling on threads and start going crazy on them, but I don't know where to go. Like first,
yeah.
This has basically been my. I still like the lore. I probably like every month or so I'll go back and I'll look at it in you know, frenzy for a couple hours, and then it's just like, I'm out of here. I don't want to look at this shit anymore. Every month ever since the DLC, but my problem with it really is I don't know where to start pulling, and I don't know if it's reasonable to start pulling, and I guess I would like more certainty in the facts. The facts are the weeds, so as you call them, because like it's hard to start. I feel like all I can do is start making weird metaphorical connections before, or I have to. I am forced into a position where I have to start looking for the big picture before I have the details. And that's unusual. Like
right. You have
That's
to make a bunch of assumptions. You have to say, if A and B and C and D and E and F, then maybe this is the
maybe
case.
yes, exactly. Oh, it's so frustrating. It's exactly the issue. And then I'm like, man, I don't want to make a video where I have to talk about, okay, we have to assume this and this and this and this, and then we can do it. It's like I have to carry a lot of effort to go through my train of thought, and then finally, okay, now here's, yeah, no, I don't want to. I'm scared.
I mean, I think there are, I think there are things where when you have something like the right answer or the right approach, the right angle on something,
the rest becomes obvious. Yeah, the
yeah,
details
it makes
become
sense
obvious.
Of, yeah, it makes sense of things in a way that looks, it looks right, you know, and it looks right. It's like, you know, when you're in a dream, you don't know whether you're in a dream or whether you're not. But when you're awake, you totally know that you're awake.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like that. I think there's certain things where once you have the right perspective on it, it just makes everything kind of click. And I think like your perspective with the Flame of Frenzy, that's that. Like that makes everything click there.
Yeah.
So there's certain once you get to that place, I think that place exists basically. It's the problem of finding the path there, which is tricky. So like I feel confident that there is, even just given all the information that we have and nothing else, I feel like there is some way of understanding all the serpent stuff.
Yeah.
That would just go, oh yeah, that's what it is. Like that's the key theme that like ties this all together, and that's what this is saying. I don't know what that is yet though.
Okay. Detail question. Messmer, who's the father? Who do you think's the father?
Well, I mean,
because the easy answer, I suppose, is Radigan. Like that
is the easy answer, and there is, I think, a lot of circumstantial evidence to support that. I think maybe the most important, apart from everything else, is that his theme song kind of quotes Radigan's theme, and that he was close with Radahn. So, and then also Rykard, you know, sort of maybe imitating him in certain ways with the snakes. So, you know, a connection with the Carians. And then also the parallel of Messmer and R'hllana versus Radagon and Rennala. So that would, you know, face value, if I stick to face value, that makes the most sense. However, there's also Messmer's sort of parallels with the Godskins. And I sort of wonder if maybe the abductor virgins is actually kind of a depiction of Marika, maybe abducting a child.
I see.
So if Marika killed the Gloom-Eyed Queen, it's possible that Messmer was the child of the Gloom-Eyed Queen, and then Marika sort of took him in. Because the thing is, we know all this stuff about, like, oh, Marika's his mother, but we know for sure that, like, children are adopted all the time, and we say someone is their mother or whatever, and that doesn't necessarily mean blood relation.
Yeah.
So that would make a certain kind of sense, and it could even be Radagon and the Gloom-Eyed Queen have this child. Marika sort of usurps the Gloom-Eyed Queen's place and takes the child. And that could even be, I think there's a reasonable argument that is what is happening in that story trailer, is that she's actually taking the gold out of Messmer.
Oh.
Because that would explain why he's got this sort of abyssal darkness within him, because he doesn't have the gold. So I mean, I don't know. I'm sort of a bit iffy on that. I think Radagon as the father makes a lot of sense.
Makes too much sense. It's yes. You know, yeah, I think that was one of the things I was thinking about. I really would have liked that to have been the case. The Radagon Gloom-Eyed Queen connection would have been interesting. But then okay, do you have you adapted any of your ideas as to the Gloom-Eyed Queen and Melina? Do you think there's, I don't remember what your position was on Melina and the Gloam-Eyed Queen. Did you have one? Has
Well,
it changed?
initially, my idea for a long time was that Marika was the Gloam-Eyed Queen, and that she basically has various sort of aspects, not just Radigan, but she sort of had different
Okay.
qualities to her, and that Melina, being a kind of offshoot child of Marika, just sort of manifested some of those qualities. Now I sort of wonder if maybe if Marika killed the Gloam-Eyed Queen, if maybe Melina was sort of cursed with that aspect in a similar way to the Omen curse because of Marika killing the
Right.
Horn Scent and that sort of thing. That she kills things, and because it's this sort of this sin of killing something divine in a sense, that this this cycle of revenge, this is sort of propagated as a curse upon her children. And so Melina, I see. I don't think it makes that much sense for Melina to literally be the Gloam-Eyed Queen. Um, if for no other reason that she just doesn't really fit the archetype. She's like the maiden, the lost maiden, rather than someone that challenged Malekith. I don't know. I know there's like visual and symbolic parallels there, but I don't see a convincing case for it on like logistical grounds. Um, so yeah, I'm think that's where I lean right now is that she's sort of
She
in a
just
way
has
that like
adopted
okay,
aspects of it in the same way that the other children have taken aspects of the
Messmer
other.
Messmer has the abyssal serpent sealed behind him. This could have been something that and fire. It could have been something related to the Fell God. It could have been something related to the Gloam-Eyed Queen, some serpent deity that Marika had to get rid of. A pagan deity that existed before Marika became the one true god. So you want to get rid of all the previous gods. Um, in a similar way, Melina could have this sort of this curse sealed behind her eye. Because it's also even if she was the Gloam-Eyed Queen, you have to kind of explain why this was like sealed away, um, because she's clearly not very Gloam-Eyed Queeny at first. It's only after her eye opens and the frenzied
Yeah.
flame comes forth.
Yeah.
So I think it makes more sense to just go, well, there's some Gloam-Eyed Queen aspect which is, within her, but I don't think that means that she was literally it.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't have a strong opinion on that. I usually get when I talk to people, it's like, no, she's totally the Gloam-Eyed Queen, or there's no way. I don't have a strong opinion on it. But she's definitely. You're correct that she has Gloam-Eyed Queen aspects. Like, I don't think we can just dismiss it like, oh, she has nothing to do with the Gloam-Eyed Queen. She has something to do with it, even if it's as small
Yeah.
as inheriting inheriting her. I don't know, all of her. She even has the birthing thing, like the importance of births that the Gloam-Eyed Queen seems to have shared.
Hmm. I mean, and it could also be if Messmer was the child of Radigan and the Gloam-Eyed Queen, that it could be that Melina was as well, and so she could literally just be the daughter of the Gloam-Eyed Queen and sort
Yeah,
of
wasn't there an item description that
inheriting
talked
that
about
legacy.
them being siblings? And she also has a fire destiny, and
Yeah, this is Messmer's younger sister also had a vision of flame,
yeah,
so which I think definitely refers to Melina. Um, I mean, the thing with the lineages is we are dealing with George R. R. Martin, and that means you know, and particularly a story about like royal lineage, where that lineage is actually really important, not just from a social who gets to rule and all that, but also in terms of like what traits are passed down, and even in a kind of magical metaphysical way what traits and curses might be passed down. So thinking about different possibilities with the lineages, I think, is totally fair game. I wouldn't assume um I wouldn't assume that we know for sure all of these all of these things unless it states directly in an item description that we know who
Right.
was born of whom. And I still kind of subscribe to the idea that Ronnie is actually the child of Marika rather than Renala.
What? Hold on. Did we talk about this before? I don't think we did. I don't think
I
you
don't
did.
remember.
I think you mentioned it one time and I was like, wait a minute, what? And then you didn't elaborate.
I think it makes a lot of sense. I think that's why you have the symbolism of the cuckoo. It's kind of a clue that, basically
Oh.
there's kind of cucking going on. Cuckoos, they insert their child into the nest of another. That's why the amber egg was given by Radigan. I think the the rune of the unborn sits within the amber egg, and what we know now is that we actually have Mikla's rune. So before the DLC came out, we had basically one great rune that we didn't know who it belonged to, and we had two demigods with runes that we didn't know where they were. Now we know where Mikla's rune is, so we have a demigod without a rune, and we've got a rune without a demigod. I think, makes the most sense for them to be related, that the rune of the unborn was Ronnie's rune that she discarded. And for that to be stored in golden amber in this egg.
Wait a minute. How could Radigan have given the rune of the unborn to Renala when he left if Ronnie still had her body back then?
Well, I don't think the runes are... Well, first of all, I don't think that the rune of the unborn was necessarily always within the amber egg.
Okay.
So this is sort of a confusing one because which gets into semantics.
Because the runes were still in the Elden Ring and they just went to the demigods, I suppose, when they were shattered. So the ring wasn't shattered at that point, and so it would have naturally gone to the egg since Ronnie no longer had her body.
Yeah, I think it's you get into some weird, like, how physical versus metaphysical are the runes. I mean, you have all, like, the benediction of the runes on the divine towers and all this stuff.
They seem to go to the appropriate person, the runes do, because the Godfrey runes, like, they go to Godric and Morgott, and certainly not Marika handing them out personally. And the Morgott supposedly proves that he's of Godfrey's lineage somehow. Mm-hmm. So I've always kind of assumed they just kind of go to where they're supposed to go after the ring shatters.
Yeah, I think that they're definitely tied to lineage and even maybe the flesh, which is why sort of there's this parallel between Ronnie and Mikla of abandoning both the body and their rune.
Yeah,
they're sort of that's part of it is part of that abandonment process. Yeah, I mean, with Ronnie, I think it's too compelling an idea. I actually haven't thought about this recently, so I'd have to go back and remind myself what my reasons were. I mean, the big one being the sort of the imagery of the cuckoo, and also the fact that she has this wolf shadow, which now we know that wolves are sort of connected to the Carians as well, but the fact that she's an Empyrean, which
Radigan has
as
wolves.
far as Mikla, right. As far as Mikla and Melania are concerned, we're told that they are. I got to always remember the exact grammar of this one because people
born of the same god.
Mikla and Melania were born of a single god, and thus, no, it's not, and thus, we're born of the same god. They were both Empyreans, but they suffered afflictions. I don't remember exactly what it is, but there's some ambiguity in that description. But it kind of frames it as like Empyreans are. Well, let's say if Empyreans were something born of a single god, then that would pretty directly suggest that Ronnie was the child of Radigan and Marika. And and even if they weren't directly born of that, it obviously is drawing a connection between those, so it would at least suggest that. And um, I think there were some other little things. I mean, Ronnie's sort of parallel and contrast to Marika. Um, the involvement in the Black Knives that I think probably Marika was involved in.
Oh, you're still pro Black Knife, America?
Yeah, I think
Wonderful
so.
news. Wonderful. I'm
I don't.
glad.
I don't think anything's. Yeah, I don't think anything changed my mind on that.
The only thing that it would make sense story wise is the reason I kind of have started to doubt it. If she wasn't involved and she actually, so the reason the demigods are immortal isn't to do with grace. That's just why you're immortal. It has to do with their deaths were literally, their destined deaths were literally removed from the Elden Ring, so they don't
Right.
have the destiny to die. And Marika did that at the start of her rule. So if it makes it makes sense if we want to make Marika a humanized character, as she had the tragedy of the shaman village. She leaves her little tree there. She does revenge against the omens, and then what does she do? She takes the death away from her children, so her children can't die anymore, and then assume that she has no involvement in the Night of the Black Knife. She goes through all this trouble to make sure her children can't die, and then her children kill each other. Ronnie's involvement with the thing, and Rykard's involved, and who knows who else is involved. And then she's like, "Well, this fucking sucks." And then, out of grief, she breaks the Elden Ring while Radigan tries to stop her. That makes sense. I just really don't want to believe it. There was a lot of evidence. I think there was a mountain of evidence. I don't see how anybody can say I was wrong about how much evidence there was, but that's a compelling story, I suppose. That little, even if it's a little simple, it's compelling enough to make me doubt my assumptions before. So
I mean, I think one of the maybe most important things that we got in the DLC was the minor Erdtree incantation, which says that it's the kindness of gold without order,
yeah,
which does a whole bunch of things. Because one, it's directly drawing the parallel between Mikla and Marika, saying that this is, at least ostensibly, their goals are motivated by some kind of kindness. That they want to, try and make the world a better place, however diluted they might be in their execution of that. And that also, America doesn't actually really care about order per se. That she's got some vision of the world that she wants to implement. That is, and also the placement of that item in the shaman village. So it's related to how basically her people were treated. So again, this kind of goes into the revenge thing. It's like some perhaps naive notion maybe of how the world could be sort of kind and gentle, and this is what Mikla is sort of attempting to do a slightly different version of, attempting to do a more effective, a more correct version of this. So with Marika, I think the idea that she would, let's say remove destined death to prevent her children from being killed, maybe. I don't know if her motivations speak exclusively to about her children, though. So I think really it comes down to the Erdtree, and the Erdtree is symbolic of this sort of vision of the world that she wants, of some kind of kindness of gold, where everyone is sort of healed. And so my idea before the DLC, and I feel like, I don't know if it's been, I don't know if I've really changed it or if it's been more confirmed actually, it was that basically Marika wanted to sacrifice Godwyn to destined death in order to fuel the Erd Tree because it was already starting to lose its luster, let's say. And then Ronnie sort of screwed that plan up by splitting the wheel of the curse mark into.
I think
I think that
I think we talked about. Yeah, we did discuss that. One of the pieces of evidence is that God, I don't remember. There was a really strong piece of evidence that I thought went in that direction.
Well, there's the finger reader crone in the Deep Root Depths who says that Godwyn should have been a martyr to destined death.
Yes, that was the one.
Which is, that makes a lot of sense. And we have all this context for how sort of trees are fertilized by the blood of the dead, of the blood of sacrifices and so on. So the idea that Godwyn would have been, a great sacrifice to revive this tree after this age of plenty was so short-lived and quickly came to a close that Marika would want some way to keep it going. That all kind of fits in a way, and I don't see see any new evidence that really contradicts that. So
the martyr to destined death, that one really I felt was compelling, because he wouldn't be a martyr if he was just assassinated. That doesn't make him a martyr. There's a couple ways that the word martyr is used, like dying for your beliefs, unjustly persecuted for your beliefs. That's one way. But nowadays it's also used dying in service to a cause, and your death promotes that cause or helps that cause. It becomes a catalyst to making that a reality. So if Marika was completely uninvolved, like the crone is sad that he's not a martyr to destined death. She's not just said that he's dead. He said that he's like that, undead, in this undead state, and that he's not a martyr. That's what she seems to be saying. So that I think is a strong piece of evidence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also I would say with the DLC, I feel like the fact that we basically don't get anything about Godwyn, or very little, it kind of suggests that he's not really a critical figure in the main story, except as far as his assassination is concerned. So, because you could come up with all sorts of other reasons for what goes on during the Black Knives and what the motivations were, but at least as far as anything that the DLC concerns, there's no extra relevant information that they felt was necessary.
Yeah.
Right. All the only story of Godwyn that's necessary to communicate.
The Godwyn fans.
Many people. Yeah. I mean, but the only story that was necessary to communicate was that, he was an epic dude who fought dragons, and that then this assassination and what happened to him after his death. Right. So anything before is not really relevant to his story. So to me, that just tells me that, like, the reason he is killed is not because of anything, not for any reason that's critically important to the story about him, basically. Which would mean, that doesn't necessarily mean it's this idea of fertilizing the Erd Tree, but that's I think makes a strong case for it.
Okay, I actually have like half of my notes still, but my voice is starting to go. Like, we could probably keep going for another 2 hours.
Yeah,
we should have done more podcasts in between to like space this out. But I think we'll have to wrap up here, and we'll just keep continue another day if you're open to it.
Yeah, I'm down. Basically, I mean, after the DLC, I took some time off because I just needed to, like, it's basically since that very first trailer of Elden Ring, there's been like this hype just bubbling and bubbling and bubbling. And then after the DLC dropped, it was kind of, I wasn't like disappointed or anything with it, but it just felt like suddenly the temperature was turned off,
Yeah.
And so it's just like, oh my God, okay. I'm gonna like go do something else for it. But now I'm back in it, and especially with Nightrain, I'm like, okay, here we go. We gotta do this.
Another chance. Let's go. Give me that Nightrain lore, please. When do you think it's coming out? Do you think it's gonna be soonish?
Yeah, I would guess probably this summer. It seems like a much smaller game, and time between network test and release is usually not. It's not like 2 years. It's usually like a matter of months. So if we get a network test in February, probably means late spring. I mean, maybe at the latest if they really need to do a lot of extra stuff like October or something. But I would say probably summer.
When I was looking at the trailer first time when I was streaming the trailer, and I was sitting there and I was thinking about it. It's like, you know what, I had said I was done with Elden Ring. I was said that no, I want something new from FromSoftware. I don't want them to keep doing Elden Ring. I don't want to stay in this world. I'm done with the world. Let's go to something else. And then I see the trailer and I realize oh no, I was wrong. I was lying. I was lying to myself. I want to stay right here. I don't want to go anywhere else. I was coping because I thought it was
you on the hook. Yeah. I'm ready for more.
Okay. Just so I don't lose my voice, we're gonna end it here. Thank you all for listening. This has been the Yggdrasil Podcast. I'll see you all next time. Thank you, Crunchy. Goodbye.